Magic.me is the world's greatest school for magic, meditation, and mysticism. You can learn everything there, from chaos magic to hermeticism to meditation to how to supercharge your finances and take absolute control of your destiny. In short, you get all of the tools you need to turn chaos into beautiful, scintillating order and master your life. It's incredible. You've probably heard me talk about it on the show quite a lot. But check it out. It's growing fast. And I just want to say, if you're confused about where to start, because I have so many courses there, the Adept Initiative is the place to go. The Adept Initiative is the flagship course on magic.me, and it contains everything you need to know to master the most profound ancient techniques of changing your consciousness and the most modern and cutting edge tools and systems for absolutely turning your life into a masterpiece. You are really going to dig it. Go check it out, and I will see you in class. It's magic.me, magick.me.
Computer screen so I can actually see what's on the monitor behind me. It's kind of a bitch. I'm just afraid to replace it, but I bought like a replacement MacBook Pro screen, but
Okay.
I'm really it's like a 37-step fucking process to do. I don't want to fuck this up. It's like a $4,000 computer.
This is my whole life. I mean, I feel like I'm always like buying gear to like do stuff easier, and then it's always the opposite. It's just, I feel like my whole life consists of constantly being tangled up in cords and passwords. My least favorite ever, passwords, two-factor authentication, having to solve fucking puzzles to prove that I'm a human being.
Well, by the way, whenever I say I read something these days, it just means I saw it on TikTok. But basically,
okay.
I saw that function of proving whether you're a robot or not actually has nothing to do with verifying that you're human. It's to basically run a script that checks everything that you've done before that, which is how they determine if you're a human.
Get the fuck out.
Behavior. Yeah. It's like
why do you have to do that annoying shit then? Why don't they just run a script?
Yeah, they're basically like, it's a consent. I mean, there's probably some legality or some loophole they have to get around to like consent for something, but like it basically, its function is to grab all of your browsing data.
Okay.
It's not really to prove whether you're human.
So we've been lied to.
Yeah, I mean, what are the chances?
That makes me angry. So it's basically just to get around consent frameworks, and there's no reason. God damn it.
Pretty much.
Well, that's a lovely note to start the day on. This is the earliest podcast I've ever done, I think. I am hiding from the
recording in progress.
Whoa.
I just turned on recording just so we have backup.
Got it. That's a good idea. Yes.
Yeah,
this is
always.
Yeah, good call. Yes. Anyways, this is the earliest podcast I've ever done. Thank you. It is currently 7:25 a.m. Thank you for being up for this.
This is your night. This is your night, you told me.
Yeah, I'm a vampire now. I'm hiding from the hated sun. I developed this weird, I don't even know what to call it, like a nervous tick. What do you call that? Like a weird trauma formation behavior during 2020. Like after like after going through the riots, I was just like, I'm just gonna stay awake at night where there's less people and they can't see me in the night. I'm just gonna hide in the night.
I literally like I wish I could be nocturnal. You can get so much done. I also just feel like energetically there's so much less activity in your like where you are locally that you can actually, that's why night feels very different just from like a psychic space. So I mean, I love like any creative project or something, doing it at night is like, that's the way to go. That's 100%. Pretty badass, man.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's like, I feel like I've thought about this a lot actually. It's like, maybe you can tell, like, obviously you can tell because you're talking about it. It's like, I've always felt like it's like the radio waves aren't crowded.
Totally. Exactly how I would describe it. That's perfect. Like metaphor for what it is. That's because it's true. Like they're doing stuff. It's just at a different frequency, right? Like really actually in their brain, the electrical frequency is at a different wavelength when they're in deep sleep or REM or light sleep or whatever it is. Whereas if you're up and active and like thinking things, like you're getting more of that range. You have more space there. It's
No,
good for the mix.
I'm a big believer that we are in a morphogenetic field or whatever you want to call it, that we're in a shared mental space, which is why watching your manners in your own mind is so important for yourself, most of all. Um, but no, it's totally a thing. And during the day, like everyone's running around like chickens with their head cut off, doing
Yeah.
frantic activity, picking their kids up, soccer practice, going to the store, like, you know, they're always angry and stressed, going to Starbucks, you know, and it's just like you can feel it. You can feel it. And then at night it's just like nice and quiet. And you can actually get some creative work done and some creative thoughts in. So although I don't know about you, but I always feel like a little bit zombified at night. It's very hard for me to move physically.
Yeah, it's definitely a different vibe. I mean, I'm a big weed smoker, so like I kind of like that aspect of it. Like it's just dreamy. It's weird. There's no sun, like whatever melatonin function you're supposed to be getting, it's like your body's probably trying to tell you to go to sleep. But I it's just from a creative standpoint, I just always know whenever I get like whenever I can stay up to like 3, 4 in the morning in regular people's time. It's those are like some of my most creative nights when you're just like in the flow. It's not every night, but like I don't know, cool shit happens at night too. Like
Yeah.
it's just that's I don't know.
Also,
It
people don't
does.
bug you. They don't blow your phone up or your email or anything like that. You know, it's kind of, yeah. And if you're not buggable, people don't bug you, if that makes
That's
sense.
I learned that lesson maybe 20 years ago. And it has
How
been
so?
I just realized like I my friendships, like my biggest and longest friendships, are less based on frequency and more based on like depth. Like I could legitimately not see or even speak to more than like, you know, through whatever shared interests we may have, like maybe like a fantasy football league or something like that. But I can literally have friends in various groups who I don't really see that often physically, but sometimes don't even speak to. But if I'm it's like immediately if they call or you need to meet up or they need help or whatever, it's like there's no questions asked. It's almost like a family relationship where you
Yeah.
know you don't have to be like in touch all the time to be connected. And so when I realized that, I was like, all right, I don't have to um, you know, like go out. I don't want to go out of my way. I don't want to seem like aloof, but like I usually am the person getting contacted rather than contacting. Obviously, if it's like something I need or like there's a reason to be doing it, I'm not reticent about it, but like it just works better. Like you get less input and people will be like, man, that's like isolating or whatever. I'm like, yeah, but I just don't have the time and space for like extra shit on top of it. And I think most of my good friends understand that and it has nothing to do with like my love or like what I'm willing to do for them or loyalty. And so like those friendships tend to be like easier to maintain, but still have that quality um of like deepness, I guess. And so that
Yeah.
I don't get but hit up excessively. Usually.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just a general thing that as you get older, you value fewer close relationships.
Yeah, it seems to be accurate.
Yeah.
Totally.
Because you just don't have as much energy. You can't like spread it around, you know?
Yeah, it's true. I guess it does have to do with like energy capacity in a lot of ways because like you prioritize, you know, certain things. I mean, I guess listen, the truth is this is if it was incredibly important to me to have like frequent hangouts and talking all the time with my friends, I'm sure my life would look like that. It's just for me, I like solitude. I really value it in like a deep and like reverent way.
Yeah, I do too. So the whole the lockdown part of COVID was actually a bit of a relief for me because it was just like I wasn't expected to hang out with people anymore and I didn't
I
have to
loved
excuse
it.
it. Everything else was awful, in just in the worst possible ways. But that part I was not too put out by. I think I'm on permanent lockdown. Actually, I'm just going to keep this going.
I mean, introverts paradise. That was the lost kind of theme of the lockdown. I mean, I'm sure it got to everyone at some point. Like there were enough inconveniences, enough other shit that was like kind of like annoying. But yeah, if you're a true introvert and like you value your time and your space, like I mean, you had every excuse not to ever do
Yep.
anything.
Yep.
So
So I've been told by people who listen to your show that I should ask you about timeline hopping. We're on a we're at an interesting timeline hop point right now. I think we got Elon on Twitter. Crypto is doing God knows what.
oh man.
Um, Yeah, the economy's going off a cliff. Trump's coming back, maybe. He probably
That-
will be by the time this comes out on Twitter. Things of the deck. The deck has gotten shuffled, I think. So let's talk about this because I like this topic a lot. Where are we? What timeline are we on right now?
Well, I read the Philip K. Dick thing, which is basically kind of like a 2-minute encapsulation of like his views and how timelines work and how the multiverse works and how there's infinite kind of sequences to a simulation, so to speak. I'm not like a huge simulation guy per se. Like I don't think it's actually like a computer the way we perceive of a computer, but in some ways it's an accurate description for what's going on. All possibilities exist at all times. Our life and what we perceive is predicated on what we are aware of and kind of tuned to at any given point. So at various different points, people kind of become more aware of that as a process. And that's when I think we get these weird, like jumpy, like mushy, like what the fuck is going on, like timelines, because anyone who kind of truly grasps that principle can theoretically, for someone who's not really like exerting the effort to like live a timeline they would like to enjoy to live in or experience, not even enjoy isn't the right word, but desire to experience, right? Because like a lot of times we get stuff in our timeline like it's not enjoyable,
Right.
but it does serve a function. And I personally believe like our ability to timeline jump is an individualistic decision. And so it's based on our emotions and what we truly believe and feel, which can't be like manufactured intellectually or mentally. It's really based on like an emotional, felt, visceral sense of belief. And I think what we're experiencing now is kind of more people, I think, are becoming aware of that in some ways, and whatever metaphor or ideology or whatever it looks like for them, this awareness of like individual, not in a necessarily selfish way, but in like I'm creating my own reality type way. And we can see this in varying degrees of success. Like I always think about this when we see like a Sam Bankman-Fried guy, just like, dude, Icarus. Like, could you be more of the
Yeah.
archetypal Icarus? You must
He's
have
a lot of
known
archetypes.
oh, I mean, that's true. And like, there's a powerful energy there, but like, this guy embodied something that he probably deep down, since the moment he started getting funny with the money, whether that was before he even planned to or just it just happened, he knew this was going to be the inevitable result. Like it's very no one gets away with this type of shit, especially at the reckless level that he was engaging it in.
Yeah.
But like that, he was writing that story. I mean, you look at it and you go, how the fuck does Sequoia, does all these huge investment firms not do like the big, like I've been doing crypto for a while, like never would have kept my money on FTX. The best term I heard for exchanges, like any fiat on-ramp, off-ramp that you have to use to get like dollars out or whatever your native currency is treat it like a public restroom. Get in and get the fuck out. Like don't be hanging around there, leaving your shit around like your valuable stuff. So I mean, it was kind of like you could see that it was going on, but this was one guy basically.
It's one guy. I mean, well, it's like the return of Mount Gox, though. I mean, it's like we've seen this happen before, but he's also just like the archetype of the crypto bro. You know, like I saw, you probably saw on Twitter, there were videos going around of him where he's clearly like taken so much Adderall that he's having like involuntary shaking.
Dude, he's mainlining speed. Are you kidding me?
He was?
Patch. Yeah, dude,
I
he
missed
had the patch. Yeah. He had the patch where they were just like plugging in the Adderall or Dextrin.
Oh, awesome.
Whatever
That's a great recipe for mental and emotional stability.
It's like a perverted beatnik society. That's where we are. If you really want to think about from Jack Kerouac and all the people just being meth head or speed heads. Now we got fucking Sam Bankman-Fried and Caroline.
Well, it's also how the Nazi Germany happened.
Yeah, that's also true. That's a great point. Hitler.
The whole country was on meth. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Bavarian. Yeah.
Yep.
It's dark. Yeah, but it's just like I mean, I'm sure you've seen this many times. There's just this quality with crypto people where they live in like magical delusional reality where they think they can do anything, you know, and it extends to all levels of their life.
But that is the trick of crypto. You have to embody that way of being while things are going up, and it really is like that because they're these crazy manic runs predictably happen in this space. I don't know that it's specifically because crypto is such a great technology. Personally, not a huge fan of crypto, all the applications of potential blockchains. I don't even think blockchain is that great. It's great for basically a very few like a small subset of things. As a technology, like regular SQL database, SQL database is way better. It's faster. It's more, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of those cryptos like Solana are literally just SQL databases with a crypto front end. I mean, they're literally running it in AWS. And just like faking that it's a blockchain, you know?
And you know, with validators that are chosen, essentially, it's like the point is this: is that whether it's the technology or not, I am a Bitcoin lover. I am that. I like Monero. I like some things.
But I love Monero.
I mean, who doesn't love Monero? You know, if you need to get some stuff, Monero's pretty good.
Yeah. So, well, as an anarchist and a free software advocate, that's the only one that fulfills the original point of Bitcoin, which was anonymous money. Like that was the point. I mean,
it was one of the points, but it definitely was a big point for the people who were coming up with Bitcoin.
Like I just saw like an article that there was a Tibetan monk that got arrested by the Chinese government.
Oh yeah,
for sending for wiring money in Wells Fargo to somebody in another country, and then they took him off to torture him. You know, it's just awful there. So
Bitcoin's not anonymous at all. It's the least anonymous thing.
There's a public record of transactions. It's
exactly. Imagine Venmo, except you can't make it private. It's just always there.
Venmo creeps me out so much. It's like I don't want to know that you paid your friend for a hot dog, and just like hot dog heart emoji, thanks. It's like,
maybe it was like care. Dick or something, you know. You never
right. Right. Yeah, you know. But then it's like it's so stalkery. It's like, oh, what are people up to? But
I don't know why anyone doesn't just make it private. It's true.
Yeah, free software and anonymity are big, beliefs of mine. So that is
I didn't
good.
Want to sidetrack from the timeline jumping too much, but basically my premise and what I think I've experienced enough to truly believe is that we get to choose kind of the timeline we jump on and experience, and that we're in this huge array of choices in front of us. It's like there's so many. It's like the 7 of Cups in the tarot, and it's just like all these different things you can choose. And you know, that's overwhelming at times because like I don't think many of us would have predictably chosen that Trump would have been president in 2016. Was it 16? Did he get elected?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Christ, it feels like
it's just like walking through molasses.
It's insane.
Yeah, so, totally insane.
We basically are kind of destined, not in like a condemning sense, but to experience what we are willing to believe. And apparently a lot of us are willing to believe some outrageous shit. So.
Well, you saw Elon's thing, his version of Occam's razor is that the most entertaining thing is always what's going to actually happen.
I'm aligned with him on that. I saw him tweet, I'm like half the stuff I mean, he's a very polarizing figure. Half the stuff Elon does, I'm like, all right, cool. And then other half of shit, I'm like, dude, what are you? How is this? Like, I get it. It seems kind of how a normal-ish person would act with the $1 billion, like billions of dollars to me. Like, I'm just gonna buy Twitter and like, fuck, man. I was worried like one day when everyone was doomsday, Twitter's done. Doomsday, Twitter's done.
So ridiculous.
And like one day I got freaked out about it. I'm like, is it really going to be done? Because it said there was like a difference in like sending tweets. It was like send now. I'm like, what is this? But it's been exactly the same for me. It's been fine.
It's been way more fun for me. It's just like, it's a party now. All these people are on. Yeah, I mean, like I saw the definitive tweet about this whole thing. It was just like, if you're worried about somebody new owning this website, you really need to go outside.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's really it at the end of the day. Everyone's going to Mastodon, which from what I can tell is just a total quagmire of hellishness. Yeah. So, but I love salt mining. You know, I love watching people like just like have these histrionic moral fits about things on Twitter. It's so funny to me. Like people who take things that seriously are just endlessly, it's kind of like somebody who can't really dance and is just like bumping into things. Or like if you're not flexible and somebody hits you, your bone breaks instead of you moving. It's like there's a lot of inflexible people in the world, and they're really hilarious to watch on Twitter.
and why did it become like it's like it's weird to me that that's just like the place it became where you do that. This is what I think about sometimes when I think about the different platforms. Like, why on Facebook do you have to post like 1998, Windows 95 fucking pictures with like inspirational quotes on it? Like, why did that become the default place for that? Why is Twitter just literally people forgetting that the filter for the mouth is there for a reason sometimes. You really need to say it out loud sometimes.
Stop saying mouth words.
Like, holy shit. How are people, like, do people know that other people can read this? And I've been guilty of it. I joined in 2009. I was like in New York, drunk at bars and shit. I've had to go through and delete a lot of fucking tweets. Don't get me wrong.
I think I joined in 2007. I have a weird psychic ability for it's my one psychic ability where I can sense social media backlash. So I'll delete something like 30 seconds after I post it because I can see it coming.
Dude, I did not have that foresight. I think like 4 years ago or something, I was like, I should probably go back and check because I remember being drunk a lot and tweeting. And I don't remember.
That's never
all
gone
of those
wrong
nights.
for anybody. Or ambient tweeting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Twitter, but it's just like, I don't know, like somebody, it was like an ex-finance guy for the DNC was posting like, I would crawl over miles of barbed wire and broken glass with my shirt off to vote against Trump. Who's with me? And I just tweeted just like, calm down, Deborah. Like, oh, I don't need to know about like your barbed wire, broken glass, shirtless Trump fantasies. This is really
it's weird.
Just take a look at yourself. Come on, like self-awareness, please. But I do have to admit, like, there's a lot of and I'm not above this. There's a lot of just like bitter glee going on with me right now. Just like watching. It's basically like, like I'm an old Web 1.0 guy. I got on the internet in 1993 and I was on bulletin boards in 1987. And for me, the internet was like, first of all, saved my life. Second of all, I've been on my entire life. Third was the great utopian dream for the post Cold War world, that everyone was going to come together and build this beautiful society. And in a lot of ways that has happened. I wouldn't like underplay it. There's so much cool stuff has happened on the internet. But then it's like, it's like you're like the nerd outcast who's on the internet, like talking to people like you. And then like all the popular kids show up and they just start like snubbing you and like saying you can't eat with us because you don't have a blue check mark. And it's like, you motherfuckers. So I'm reveling in their delicious tears right now. I'm not above admitting.
I paid $8 for the blue check mark.
Oh yeah.
I was like instantly, I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna do this. Like, why wouldn't I do this? It's my name, first of all. I want the check mark next to my fucking name. If it was like a weird parody account,
you can buy them now?
Yeah, no, it was open for like 2 days, and I bought it the first day in.
So it's still exclusive. You're like, I got a blue tweet.
Yeah, and I think that might have even been his fucking plan. Like, let people get a taste of this, and then have like different pricing tiers for like longer use. I mean, they should make Twitter subscription in some ways, not for all the features. Like, there should always be a free one, but like. Twitter has always been my favorite social media platform, like hands down, since like the day I joined it. Like it was a more direct way. It was like a group chat with everyone initially, and it was only people you really knew. There weren't that many like media. It's like most social networks, and then it became this like, whether you want to call it a digital town hall or whatever it is. Like you can, every like crazy. Remember like the Boston bombers?
Yeah.
Like the suicide, or not the suicide, but they did the
Sarnov brothers or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that was on Twitter. You could find radio police scanners of them going and like searching. I was like, this is insane. There was no other place you could do that as far as I knew on the internet so easily and so quickly with like community sourced things, like people on the ground taking videos. So
yeah. Well, the Arab Spring also, I mean, let's not forget. I mean, that was I think when Twitter peaked, that was huge. But then they realized, wait, this could happen here. Wait a minute. we gotta muddy the waters here.
That's the weird part about like this double. I don't know if it's strictly a liberal thing. I'm sure that it's not. But one thing of it, like it's weird to be so kind of pro free speech in one way and then so pro censorship in another way. Like that dance makes less and less
yeah.
sense as time goes on and gets more apparently absurd because like I understand we don't want a platform to devolve into the worst parts of us, like that AI program that they put out there and just like
Tay AI.
Yeah,
that was hilarious though, you gotta admit. I mean, it's just so foul, but it's just like
and I understand we don't want that for like social networks, and no one would advocate for that. But naturally, outside of like, and I guess this is where it comes in, it's like subjectively egregious offenses. And I guess if you're a person who identifies as like a raccoon and people are shitting on the raccoon identifiers, then you have every right to be like, you're attacking my identity. So it's this like weird nebulous like identity game. But like, I don't know, like we shouldn't really be banning people and suspending them permanently from a platform like Twitter for like like what's labeled as misinformation, because information changes in the context.
It's also like who decides what's misinformation and what's not, and that's the answer ultimately is not the people that you want. You know, like that's the thing that drove me crazy about the whole fake news argument, because I was running Ultra Culture, the blog, before that.
Right.
It's like, okay, so basically what you're saying there is that anybody who's not the New York Times is not allowed to speak. And you can tell like the legacy media was just like trying to hold on to like the last little bits of relevance. But it's just like, well, now everyone has a voice and we have to deal with that. So yeah, I'm a free speech absolutist. I always have been. I grew up in the 90s. You know, I'm outside of, you know, people being hurt literally and you know, like obvious things, which apparently Elon's doing pretty good at moderating, better in some cases than the people he replaced from what I've seen. Yeah, just like have at it. That's the point of the internet. Because otherwise, once you push the censorship button, it's like there, you know, it's like the One Ring. It's like, oh, just this once. No, throw it into the fire. You can't do it. It will automatically corrupt you. You know,
right.
The whole point there. It's so funny too. It's like, it's interesting to think about, like, people talk about social media like it's something new. I remember reading in the Roman Empire, they had literally Roman walls everywhere. And it was just like a given that it was okay to write on the walls. So like they've uncovered like parts of these walls, and it's just like, you know, like the emperor's a dick, and then like, you know, just pictures of the emperor as a donkey, or like some people drawing dicks, and you know, it's just like the same, you know, it's like bathroom wall stuff, you know. But you gotta have you gotta let people blow off steam, you know. It's like you gotta let people speak, and you know, I think the argument that Twitter is a private company and therefore they can censor people, it's like, well, that's only half true, because like we know these social media companies were set up with State Department money, definitely Facebook, and they're kind of porous and interchangeable with the government. Maybe Facebook more than Twitter, but you know, that line is very blurry now. Yeah. If not directly set up with State Department money in the case of Google and Facebook. So yeah, and it just is how people communicate. It's like, yeah, like you can kick someone off Twitter and they can go rant like on a soapbox in a public park like people used to do, or like make zines, which is still cool, but it's you can't, you know, it's not the same thing.
Yeah, it's weird that should ever be on the table for just some of the bannings and like things that I've seen. And like I don't like some of the people who are banned. It's like they're not like my favorite people, and I think their opinion is so great and wonderful. It's just I also tend to believe that, you know, maybe this is naive because ideologies can certainly, you know, gain steam really quickly if left completely unchecked. But like, you know, if your ideas are not that sound ultimately and can be disproven somehow, some way, through some medium that makes enough sense to enough people, that usually isn't going to like galvanize a huge thing. Now, people may be like, well, Trump did that, but like Trump is resonating with enough people. People need to accept that as a reality and then just go from there rather than being like, it's wrong that people are resonating with Trump. Irrelevant. It's a bell has been rung. Right. Those people are ringing now. Right. Don't fucking worry about.
Like, you realize we live in a democracy, right? It's like, you know, like I don't like Trump. Like most people don't like Trump, but it's just like he's literally an ex-president of the United States. He was at one point the most powerful person in the world. Crazy. You can't just flex on him like that, you know. So, or you can, but then we got to see it play out. I mean, exactly. Yeah, and the idea that, I mean, yes, okay, like ideologies can pick up steam really fast and spread, but all of the really noxious ideologies of the last 10 years have come out of like, you know, places like 8chan and like places where people have been exiled, you know,
exactly.
Not, you know. So this stuff breeds
dark in the corners.
Yeah. So
where they can thrive. Exactly.
Because think about this. I mean, like, let's say you're like a kid that like posts something that people decide is problematic or something like that. You know, they decide it's racist. Okay, let's say you're a kid that posts a racist tweet. Okay, and you get banned off Twitter. Well, now you got nowhere to go. Well, now you're going to go where all the other people who got banned went, which is like 8chan or something like that. And then now they're all going to radicalize each other. It's like when you send people to prison. It's like Khan College, you know, it's like let's go put them with the hardened offenders so they can learn, you know?
Well, and then also combine that with the fact that now the algorithmic, like the way YouTube and all these other major media streams work, TikTok, everything, they are very rapidly catering material that gets you engaged. It's not even like this nefarious plot to radicalize people. The algorithm is just going, oh, this person really watches the shit out of this. They really like stuff like this. And so like, it's easy to get sucked into these vortexes. And, you know, if depending on what's going on in your life and how in control and secure you feel about yourself and what's going on in your relationships, that can be like a really potent combo for like destruction and depression and, you know, really the things that lead to people becoming despondent where they're susceptible to even like hateful, violent radicalism. That's the root of it. Like we shouldn't be like, it's not like we haven't figured it out. So like, oh, these people were happy, really pleasant. They were just helping old ladies down the street.
Yeah. See the positive social relationships, volunteering in their community.
Yeah, exactly. It's really a mystery. So it's just like, it is this weird combo of stuff that is going on. And, you know, again, to me, it does. This is like, I guess my only, you know, conservative real belief in some ways is it is an individual, not exclusively, there's support systems in place for a lot of reasons, but like ultimately it's an individual's decision to monitor what they're thinking and feeling and decide if it's something that feels good for them. Like that's important to do.
Yeah. The other way to look at it too is that just the idea of building immunity. It's like you have to be exposed to toxins in order to know what they are and build antibodies to them.
So true.
And that's it. You know, it's like, you know, growing up in the 90s, I was, you know, there was a whole lot of like toxic shit, you know, it was like the peak edgelord culture. But
tell me about it. I was born in 83. They just kicked me out of millennials. So they kicked me out there. I'm not Gen X. I'm somewhere nebulously.
Wait, I thought 82 was the cutoff for millennials.
Yeah, go check it out now. That's not the case.
They changed
it's 84, and now I'm just stuck in the fucking middle.
Oh well, you're with me. I was born in 81, so I'm a Zennial. That's good.
I'm a Zennial.
You should be happy about that.
Do that.
You should be happy about that. Who wants to be a millennial? They're a scourge on the earth.
It's not the point. It's just they're moving my age bracket up, and that's what I take offense to. It's like
it's like Pluto. Decide. They're changing your status like Pluto.
Yo, they did this because I know from my astrology chart where my placements were in Scorpio and Libra, and because I'm really close, and Pluto moves incredibly slowly. They shifted massively where Pluto was on the chart and all this stuff. This is astrologically. I know they got rid of it scientifically as well, but I'm like not a real believer in the Mandela effect. I think it's too easy for us to like batch information and get it wrong. To
although I don't know, you don't like that. Okay,
but I was going to say there's some things where I'm like, I don't know. Like,
do you know the fruit of the loom one?
Oh, the cornucopia was there, 100%. I grew up in that age.
There,
100%,
it was 100% there.
Not even a question.
Yeah. So this is the question for anyone who doesn't know about this. Do you remember the label on Fruit of the Loom underwear? Did it have a cornucopia in it? Okay, now go look it up on Google Images.
It's fucked up. It's either a
That's
massive
that
psyop.
that's fucked. I mean, talking about timeline hopping, right? Like I see things like that and I'm like, maybe that's a little marker that a timeline was shifted at some point. And if you remember it being different, then you were there before the matrix was changed. You know what I mean?
So I think this does make sense from like a splitting of like consciousness, like a polarity split for the earth, or even a reversal of it, like the magnetic poles. Even like basically you choose what you remember ultimately and what you want to experience in the future. Whether you recognize that future projecting thing and how to modulate and pull some of those levers is, dependent on where you are. But the past definitely is not as solid state as we would like to imagine it either. And I think if enough people are of resonating at a similar frequency, just like whatever that is, energetically, vibrationally, they will become one of the people who are like, yeah, I very clearly remember the cornucopia.
Yeah.
I don't hear a ton of people being like, I know there was no cornucopia,
No.
but there are a lot of people who are like, I don't really ever remember paying attention.
I remember
to that.
a specific moment when I was like 5 years old seeing the cornucopia. Like
still looking at it and be like, that's crazy. What is that?
Yeah.
What is that basket thing?
And you probably have too. I've talked to lots of people who have had the same experience. Like, what?
Yeah,
what?
Weird. It's really
yeah.
I mean, that is to me kind of evidence that yes, some of us, the way we're choosing to perceive this reality. I mean, ultimately, if you and I are talking, it means we believe in enough of a consensus reality that we exist at the same time and are able to interact with each other. Right. So it makes sense that a lot of us would have these like mass Mandela effects where things change. I mean, it's weird to me that people remember Nelson Mandela alive, being dead. I don't remember that, but it also seems somewhat plausible to me. It doesn't seem like outside of thing, but like, that's why it's called the Mandela effect. But like, there are enough of those. The Fruit of the Loom one is probably the most sure I am, actually, because I do specifically remember as a kid being like, what is that? Like, fruit I had seen, but what is this basket?
Right. Right. Yeah, I totally I guess what's the only logical explanation is that there was some other logo around at the time that was similar enough and had a cornucopia.
I guess. I mean, but underwear though, it was definitely clothing. It was definitely clothing.
Yeah, like I saw it so like I don't know, man.
It's weird.
I'm looking up other Mandela effects because this
Febreze is one.
What's the Febreze one?
That there were 2 E's in Febreze, which I vaguely remember, and then they just changed it to Febreze. What's the other one?
There were never 2 E's in Febreze.
They say there was no 2. I vaguely remember there being 2, and now it's not. If you look it up, it's Febreze, which seems wrong. I feel also the Berenstain Bears, Berenstain. I do remember Berenstain.
Well, that's a real thing because it was published 2 ways, I think.
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong. Maybe that explanation was implanted in my mind also to explain it.
I like it, and I take it as signs that our consciousness and our past and forward facing are very malleable. They're not as fixed state as we perceive them. That's just like our perception creates our reality, literally.
100%. I mean, one thing that Genesis Burrage always said to me was, and just said in general, was, change the way to perceive and change all memory. And it didn't make sense to me at first, but it's like, no, totally.
Exactly.
One of the crazy things about that too that I've been thinking about is now that AI is like, there's all this AI technology now for like colorizing or upsampling old footage. It's like AI is going to completely change the way we perceive reality or perceive the past.
Yeah, because it's going to be different, and it's going to be different details than one would be able to perceive, 30 years ago or now. But
you can go back and see things in color, it's like, and now it seems real. Or like, here's another almost Mandela effect one. It's like, it's basically impossible to see the original Star Wars now.
Really?
You can't get, I think maybe some people like tried to source it online, but you can't. It's not possible, or it's extremely hard at the least to see Star Wars as it was originally screened, and I think even as it was originally released on videotape, because they've changed the movies so many times that you can't get you can't get the original cut.
Yeah, that I guess like I get it as like an artist or creator standpoint that's your liberty to do that, but I also Like I get that. I really do very strongly get that. But like I guess when
But you got to
something
leave the
enters,
original too.
yeah, when something
Because
enters
that's
the
part of
zeitgeist like that.
that's part of people's collective memory, especially something like that. It was so defining for so many people. You know,
Yeah, well,
I
that
don't know
was a
what they were
Mandela
doing.
effect thing. The I am your father, that that changed. The Luke, I am your father, which I remember. And then that what he actually says is something different. Oh, the other one that I remember too is Cinderella. It was the witch would go, mirror, mirror on the wall.
Yeah.
And they're saying that's not what she
Wait,
said. She
what?
said magic mirror on the wall. I'm like,
No,
what?
that is not what
No,
she said.
like
What the
that's
hell?
totally not it. Like
Magic mirror?
these are
No, I
things
don't
that
never. What the fuck?
I know.
No, that
That's
I've
the
never
type
heard
of
that
shit.
before.
I trust my early memories, which I guess theoretically might be the most fallible, but I do trust those as like in deeply entrenched. Like I remember for some reason where I was when Princess Diana died.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do remember where I was. I
yeah. I
don't
remember
really
that.
have a close affinity, but I know exactly I was in my house. The blue couch was there, the TV was there. Like
Yeah.
I remember that. And that's how a lot of these like Mandela effect things are. Like I remember that being a part of my consciousness, not just an isolated incident, but like this was something that like stuck with me that I'd reflect back on to the point where like I could think about it.
But the crazy thing is, though, that everyone who remembers that stuff remembers it the same way.
Right.
It's not like you remember it differently from everyone else who was there. Like everybody apparently remembers it in the exact same theoretically wrong way.
It is
That
weird
doesn't
when a
make any
lot of people
sense.
do that. I mean, except for the fact that we're basically writing our own, choose our own adventure, and we chose to be with the people who, made that a indelible aspect of their reality, which then they can use to be like, then question the nature of their reality, which I think like is, if we're being clear, like what the functional aspect of something like the Mandela effect would be, it should get you to question the fundamental nature of reality. Like ultimately, it shouldn't just be like, that's weird. It's like, there is a real purpose to it. And I think if that's its goal, which would ultimately be what we would want to experience, it's doing a good job. Cause like this shit it's too, if deja vu you can write off, like I saw a neuroscientist explaining it, like, oh, you experience it a few milliseconds or microseconds in front of this. So, you're just replaying that the moment forward. I'm like, nah, I don't think that's what it is. Like, but I
Yeah.
understand there are theoretical explanations.
Yeah, but who cares about
physiologically.
those? It's like
So boring.
it's like I'm a magical thinker. I don't like
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
I don't care.
Okay.
Like I don't care. It's just my question is always like like how can you use it? That's always what's
Exactly.
interesting to me. And I also conversely do not care about like pseudoscientific or new age explanations or things. Like I don't care how things work. I just want to use them.
Use them
I'm a
testable.
practical guy, so
Exactly.
and reality jumping, whatever it is, maybe it's just, oh well, you're making different choices and things like that. But no, I think you can absolutely choose to jump into another timeline. And I think people have been I think if we couldn't do that, most of us would be dead by now, because I think it's a survival mechanism as well. I can think of lots of places and times where like I had no business like getting out of, but like suddenly like I was somewhere else.
Yes.
It's like I just moved, like I moved to Texas 2 years ago. It's like I don't know anyone from my life 2 years ago. It's like everyone is, on different timelines because they didn't make the jump with me.
Exactly.
It's like Quantum
Exactly.
Leap. You remember that show?
It's one of my favorite
Yeah,
shows
it's a
ever.
great
Also,
show.
you've seen the clip where they have the mentally handicapped person and
Oh,
he
yeah, yeah.
literally turns around and goes, I'm retarded. And they show the guy. It's one
That
of
was
my
a
favorite
great
shows.
episode. That I remember
Of
that
course
episode.
it was.
Yeah,
I
that
remember
was,
it too. It was an amazing show.
it
I
was
think
really
they
good.
brought it back. Yeah. Yeah, it was a great show.
Yeah, but
But
that's I think, I mean, that's kind of one of the keys of magic too. It's like you just choose timelines to hop onto. But the thing about timeline hopping is, and the reason why most people are reticent to do it, is you got to be willing to give up all the stuff in your current one, including a lot of times people. I think probably a lot of people in the last couple of years have had the experience, hopefully it's not just me, of people just suddenly turning on them.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is this, yeah.
I've also been the person who's done that. I
Okay.
realized in the
Yeah.
past year and a half,
I have too.
which is very
It's not a good feeling.
atypical for me. Yeah, I rarely do that, but I definitely was triggered by a lot of things in my life and acknowledged later down the line and apologized. But like essentially it was just like really not in a good headspace.
Well,
And
everyone's been in survival mode.
yeah, it's been, and I've been having kids during this whole time. I don't know what's going on. I'm really like playing the game on like
that's
death
advanced
mode.
difficulty.
God, I don't know why. Sometimes I love my kids, don't get me wrong. It's just like I jacked up the difficulty setting seemingly, and I get why I did it. Like it's cool, it's awesome, it really is. But man, sometimes I'm like, why did I jack it up so high so quickly during a pandemic?
Oh yeah,
What was
yeah.
this?
Well, talk about that because that. I mean, that's crazy, right? I mean, there's probably so many people have been dealing with parenting during the pandemic. I'm sure a lot of the people listening to this show, and I can't imagine. It's just like
You have to quickly figure out where you stand, like at least with like the scientific and how viruses are spread type of ideology or
okay,
viewpoint or perspective, because that will immediately be challenged when you have kids who are attending either daycare or schools,
yeah,
right? Like if they're going there, someone is going to be sick, and you will witness a pattern, which seems to be the case, that everyone at the daycare or the school gets sick in some round. So it's this never ending concoction of like disease essentially. And you have to really like figure out your like ethical and moral guidelines. Like I'll be right very upfront. Like I'm unvaccinated. I didn't get any boosters. I don't have a strong viewpoint on either side. I respect people's opinions on what they believe, but I took precautions based on that I felt were appropriate. I wasn't a huge masker at first. I started masking when it seemed like this is something that might be at least not a dumb thing to do. And I didn't take it personally if people wanted to or didn't want to. Both times I got COVID, I
okay,
got them from someone who failed to disclose that they had been experiencing COVID like symptoms and
yeah,
passed them on to someone who I interacted with. I never wanted to be the person who did that. So I took it seriously on the front, like, I'm going to test. Ultimately, do I think COVID is something that should have shut down the world for 2 years or, basically really intruded in people's lives and consciousness? No, I don't. I think it's probably going to be something we retrospectively look back on and be like, what the fuck were we thinking? Like, what a weird reaction
well,
to
who's
something.
we? Because it's not like this was a group decision.
Well, I mean, a group decision in the sense that enough people were subservient to it, right?
Yeah,
Even myself. Like there were, listen, I found there was 4 countries you could travel to in 2020 after they locked everything down. One of them was Turkey. My wife happens to be Turkish. That's for United States citizens. That's weird as fuck to me that of all of there were 4 little places: Mexico, uh, some weird African country that like probably shouldn't be going to, as some Caribbean nation,
was it
and Turkey.
Namibia? I think it was like Namibia, which is
It was like
apparently
Namibia. It was like some
Namibia is
crazy.
apparently a really really nice country.
Yeah, so you could go there. And then Turkey, which for people who don't know, is one of the largest countries in the world and literally connects Europe and Asia. So I started to understand that like functional aspects of global travel were still kind of open for service. If you have a private jet and you're in Europe, you can fly over to Turkey and catch a flight to New York on commercial. Like there's ways to kind of like do these things. So I started absolutely very early on questioning the premise of kind of like, what the fuck is going on here? Why are we all of a sudden literally shutting everything down? And also having that period to gauge for me and my family, is this safe? Is it going to
Right.
kill someone? Like you have to ask those questions. You can't be so crazy to just
Oh
completely
no,
eliminate
yeah.
the thought that like this is something you should take seriously.
Oh
I just
yeah,
said it very
I
early.
mean, malevolent governments and actual diseases can
Yeah,
coexist, unfortunately.
exactly. And so like you had to gauge that kind of like response in yourself. But like with kids, to get back to the point with that, like
Yeah,
you just have to basically figure out like what they're going to be exposed to. I was very lucky that my kids were just young enough that my oldest one was in kindergarten last year. So at the beginning of the pandemic, it was still like preschool stuff. And at preschool, like really you're just interacting with other kids. Like it's not like you're falling behind academically or like there's some, not even that that's that important, but like, you're not like moving up in some serious way in a school system, which I'm really, as a parent, really beginning to question, like at a serious, deep, fundamental level, where I don't want to be a weirdo who homeschools my kid, but I have so little faith
yeah,
in the things that are being taught to children.
yeah.
Even
I'm
when
there
I
with
was a
you. I mean,
kid.
I can't like the thought of. I mean, let alone, I hate to even bring this up, but I mean, school shootings and things like that. It's like the idea of just
Yeah.
like turning your kids over to the system is, yeah, I don't know how I would deal with that. I would not be super excited about
Yeah,
it.
I have him in Waldorf school now
Oh, that's cool.
because Steiner was a badass in a
Yep.
lot of ways. So I like that, but also like that comes with its downside too. Like people, it is not utopian.
Is
Like
it just
think
like
of the
weird
type of
hippie?
people. Yeah, it's like super hippy dippy, but also kind of like logistically run. How I worked with a lot of nonprofits in my life professionally. They're not run well. They're not
Okay.
like it is a hallmark of a nonprofit organization
Okay.
that they are typically not run well at a certain subset, I should say.
You should try out Donda Academy.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and this is, I mean, speaking of the man himself there, like, I am a huge Kanye West fan. I'm also Jewish. I'm not a fan of him and like the dumbass shit that he says,
Yeah.
but I also am someone who has been classified as manic at one point in my life and diagnosed and got off the medicine and got off the diagnosis. So I really do sympathize with a lot of what he says, but I also like you would hope someone with that much sway and collective consciousness, attention, and awareness would vet some of these things a little bit better before putting them on blast. Like internalize it a little quicker. It's clearly not like something he can do, so I don't really like ultimately condemn him for that.
Well,
but
apparently from the stuff that's coming out, I mean, he's been stewing on that one for a while. I mean, even like ex-employees are coming out saying like, yeah, like he was like talking about how great Hitler was and around the office all the time. And you know, this is like 3 or 4 years ago. So,
which like to me is horrible. And I'm not apologizing or making excuses for that. I understand how people make those jumps in their respective minds. Like Hitler, unequivocally, not a guy to listen to, not a guy to follow. Whatever brilliant pieces of wisdom you're going to get out of Mein Kampf, you're probably better off just missing it and finding some other things, like Joseph Murphy or someone. Like there's better shit you can do. So like, I just it's unfortunate that it perpetuates stereotypes that are clearly not true. Now, on some level, yes, there are a lot of Jewish people in Hollywood and a lot of Jewish people in the record industries and the music industry, but that's also tradition and the banking industry. I think like a lot of people, if they're not familiar, like the reason most Jewish people are so prominent in the banking system is because those are unsavory jobs for Europeans. That was no one wanted to be the person who's like, I'm making money off of you. So they pushed the only people who needed really got displaced to do this stuff. And so like
it's the same with the entertainment industry, right? It's just like that was considered, a job that nobody wanted to do. Yeah.
It was like, it was a joke. And so you were a jester, right? You know what I mean? You weren't a respected, producer of films. And so like, also because of that being a case, you have Harvey Weinsteins and like all of these people who are in prominent positions and whose companies, unfortunately, made some really good movies, but is a horrible person. Yeah. This is just a bad egg, but it's easy to kind of perpetuate that stereotype. And it's not good. And it doesn't affect, I in one of my episodes I got some pushback for this one. I was like, what if Hitler made dope beats? Like, what if Hitler actually made dope beats? Like, what if they were just unequivocally jams? Like, would you be able to sit there and be like
Hitler Youth drum marches?
Yeah, whatever it is. He just like he was nailing this shit and like 100 years down the line, like people, yeah, that's good. But the point isn't like I don't think that someone was like, well, Hitler would never do that. I was like, of course not. Like, it's not the point. And no one, I think, with that much hatred. Although on the novelty curve, we're probably not that far off from someone being ideologically very aligned with a Hitler type figure and making art that maybe to a large subset of people who maybe even don't like that person is subjectively good. I think that is probably something we're destined to experience, which is unfortunate.
Why is it's interesting you say in art instead of politics? Why art?
Politics already happened. That number one, like we're already seeing, like there are aspects, as much as people may not want to admit this, of what Trump did politically and kind of like structurally, logistically, that are very savvy, that are very like legitimately like well reasoned. Even if he never thought about it a day in his life, they make sense. politically, the novelty curve, we hit that with Trump. I think it could still get weirder. He can come back. There can be people, we could have The Rock doing wild
That's
shit.
gonna
Who
be
knows?
hard. It's gonna be hard to top, though. I mean,
We say that, but we think that all the time. And then, like, what do we say in
yeah,
our lives? Like every
yeah.
fucking time, it's something weirder. So to me, I look at it from the art modality because I feel pushed to that point in a lot of ways with Kanye. Like, I would be lying if I said I listened to as much Kanye today as I did maybe 3 months ago. Right? I was still really like playing a lot of jams, and I like him, and I really like even a lot of his religious stuff. I saw in LA the Sunday service at the LA College. It was amazing.
Was that
it was
with Marilyn Manson?
No, he wasn't there. It was just kind of all normal people that day, but the choir itself was incredible. Like, truly, like one of the best live performances I've ever seen in my life. So I really appreciate him from an artistic standpoint. But yeah, and I think ultimately with Kanye, and it's like, this is my real like hard take on this. I think his externalization of God and a deity is probably what's at the root of this schism between not being able to clearly see the oneness of everyone, but that the words you say and the things you emit can vibrate at a level that is hurtful to people. That's what he seems to not really like. He's got the righteous zealotry, but if he believed in his power to kind of like ultimately and had more awareness of his ability to like make people feel good and inspired, then he probably wouldn't think that there's some guy in the sky or Jesus who's coming around and like gonna bless him with some good stuff, some good juice like that.
So you're saying that like it's the say more about that. The schism is projecting God outward instead of internally.
I think if you can adapt the mindset that God is I am, it is this sense of consciousness itself. On one level, that absolutely means you are God. When people are telling stories of the creator, that's you. But you have to be able to, usually with a lot of magical and religious scripts, read the metaphors. Don't take the stuff literally. Don't miss the point entirely, but realize these are narratives about your own creative power. You're really homing in on like what we're kind of experiencing here. But the more you say there's something outside of me, and that's the thing that's creating these circumstances or situations or has this power over me, you're playing this game of 3-card Monty and you're always losing it. And
you're also projecting yourself on that thing and saying, this is, you always see this people who say that God's talking to them. It's just like, well, it's weird that he's telling you all the stuff that you clearly want to be true. Right. Or that you want other people to do. And that is like that's a thing you learn when you do a lot of magic. That's something you learn pretty quick.
The projection.
It's like all these things are projections, you know.
I mean, even Jung was talking about, I'm a big Jung fan. Like, you know, he was very clearly identified something that happens in his type of psychoanalysis where people project their shit onto him. And like just by talking about subconscious and unconscious material that emanates in dream form, it creates a connection and it can really get wonky. And I think we are constantly doing that. Far be it from me to ever suggest at this point in my life that like I fully realize God consciousness. I try to remember it as much as possible and be aware of like my mental diet and things that I'm kind of parsing and believing about life and myself. But I'm not batting 1,000. I know that, but I think that's part of like what we get to experience in this incarnation, as best as I can tell. That can change. It's always subject to change, but like that seems to be the name of the game. And I think like a lot of people, like I can't imagine getting to Kanye's level of fame and having to process what the implications of like just living your life are. Do you know what I mean? Like nor would I really want that. Like who wants to like, you think a thought and you say it. Like if you and I think a thought on Twitter, even if we had 10 times, 20 times the amount of followers and reach that we had, like it wouldn't have this global impact of like, you are an idiot, you're the dumbest person. And then some people be like, you're the smartest person. Like that's a lot of mental and psychic pressure.
Yeah.
And so I try to be like lenient with people. And that's clearly something they want to experience. I also try to remember that this is something they're looking for as an experience, whether they know it or not.
Right. And well, I mean, this is just part of, we're all learning so fast. I think that I mean, this kind of brings in a few things we were talking about earlier. The idea that we're all in a field of consciousness and we're all connected. I think that's just common sense. I don't think that's mystical or whatever. I just think that's just how it is. If you don't see that, then, I don't know, go outside more. But the other one being free speech. It's like, yeah, I am a free speech absolutist, but I'm also a believer. It's like, you got to be willing to deal with the consequences of what you say. Like, don't say free speech, but then get surprised when people get angry at what you say. I mean, you got to be able to deal with that. It's like, you have to take responsibility for what you're putting out there. Freedom is that it's not just a freedom, it's a responsibility. And we have this technology which instantly interlinks all of our minds. And it's the most magical thing imaginable. We're in a shared consciousness. And it's like, well, you can't just say like, well, it's just a tweet, bro.
It's, to me, it's weird that like, I look at comedy a lot, and comedians as kind of like really like sages of being able to look behind the veil in a lot of ways and look at it in a way and make it funny.
Well, their role also is to point at what is not okay. It's like to poke at the taboos and demonstrate what the sore spots are in a culture, and they need to be able to do that.
And to me, one of the things that I've been seeing emerge in the comedy world, and it's interesting to see different comedians take, like Chappelle really put it in focus for me. Like, I thought his set at SNL was pretty funny and pretty great, and I laughed a lot. However, I do somewhat question the idea that his speech is being infringed upon or others is being infringed upon. I don't think that's what's going on. Right. You're allowed to say those things. It's the feedback you get from it you may not like, and people may be saying, you're not allowed to say that. You're not, but they're not actually the people who get to decide whether you are allowed to say that. And Chappelle knows this better than anyone, because he's literally like, people have tried to cancel this dude pretty fucking hard over the past 2 years over a lot of his comments, and he's fine. And he's totally fine. And I, again, always kind of goes back to the same thing for me, but that's because he's stabilized after going through a wonky period. His perspective on who he is, how the world works, and like what's going on. I just think it's not necessarily an attack on free speech. An attack on free speech is banning.
No, and this is I think something really important to remember. It's like, living in a country with no free speech, what that actually looks like is you get a knock on the door in the middle of the night, right? That's because you said like you don't like the leader, maybe. It's like that's not what's going on. And there is a certain ingenuousness to it also. It's like this cancel culture argument. I mean, you see people like Jordan Peterson saying they're being censored, and meanwhile, he's like sold more books than most people in human history. It's like these people who are saying that they're being canceled, like have literally the biggest platforms for communication in human history, and everyone's listening to them. And one thing that really drove this point home for me is, okay, let's say that cancel culture is real. Okay, well, I would assume that the biggest indicator of it would be what books are banned. Okay, great. So I looked up what are the top 100 most banned books in America. It's not 12 Rules for Life. The first one is Sherman Alexie, a kid's book about life on an Indian reservation.
Oh God!
Right. Almost every single book on the top 100 banned books list is basically a personal narrative from people of color, LGBT kids, Native Americans. And it's like, well, there you go. There's your,
and it gets tough because I think there's a natural, it's like they use this in crypto a lot, this term, like a beach ball being held underwater. So like we do get this effect of, if there have been oppressed and repressed segments of society, which there always are, it's just how things balance out at times. It's not good, not necessarily as bad as people think. It is a function. When that ball
I would
comes
say
out
it's
of the water. Yeah, no, I mean, there's objectively bad things, but it's like, I try to look at this from like not like a ethical standpoint, because it's shit that happened. I didn't make the decision to do it. Right. I'm not bearing ethical responsibility for.
Well, I'm an anarchist, so I'm all for human liberation.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. And like, I also just like wonder, like, people are very quick to say, "Well, I would never become a Nazi." It's like, yeah,
you would. You
don't. You probably would.
You probably already are, and you don't realize it. It's
like if it was as easy as shopping shopping at Amazon, you probably would have become a Nazi. Like, let's not. But so my point is, this is like I don't try to draw like moral equivalencies there in terms of like what people are doing. But the ball, when it comes up out of the water, you're gonna get trans people being upset at everything. Not all trans people, but some trans people who have felt repressed and oppressed, which is absolutely true, getting upset at everything. You got to just allow that steam to blow off. If you start getting mad at that, you are going to create this like reflexive reciprocal property, which is not going to be pleasant for anyone. It's just going to be this wildly swinging, like if you're on a ship and the mast, I've unfortunately been on ships where this has happened, whipped aside because they're not stable. It's like a terrifying, not fun experience. So just like allow people to like off gas. Don't take it too seriously. And like, if you don't pay that much attention to this stuff, you'd be surprised how temporal so much of it is. Like, it really doesn't impact you as much as you think it does.
No, for sure. I mean, for me, like the whole thing about the Twitter wars, the cancel culture wars, is like, for me, you know, the shocking thing is not that, oh my God, people are. For me, the shocking thing about cancel culture is like, okay, so people are saying mean things to you on Twitter. Why do you care? You know, it's like, you're some rich comedian. Why do you care that people are shit talking you on Twitter? I mean, like, this could have been solved really easily, and it's called like putting your phone down. You know, it only becomes a thing if you react to it.
But you know why? Because everyone has that thing that when they do something, they had this thought was like, is this kind of thing? Like, am I being kind of a dick or whatever it is? And then someone keys in on it like a really good bully who makes fun of the most specific thing and just to mentally torture you. I unfortunately have been on both ends of that. Like, it's just like there's something in you that is going to vibrate at that thing, and you're going to go, fuck this person, and either make it like a subtweet, like a big part of your whatever it is. Like, it's just like,
I used to have a real problem with this. I mean, it was like an addiction of just like, I called it getting into the mosh pit, you know, the comment section, and going back, because it's like a rush, you know, it's like a video game, and it's really destructive. And now, thankfully, I just don't have that. But I had many years where, you know, I was spending days on end just like fighting people in comment sections. It's a total waste of time. But
me too.
You know,
hopefully you can grow out of. I mean, that's where I guess like what happened, I guess, for you and for me and for a lot of other people is you just realize the like futility and frivolity of doing stuff like that. And like, you just recognize I got better shit to do with my attention and awareness. It's not anything more complicated than that. It's just the intolerance for that in your life, because it's like a food you maybe used to love that was like really sugary and sweet, and then you got older and you're like, this is disgusting, like Hawaiian punch or some shit, like whatever it is, and just be like, this is like, why do people? But that's kind of how we just start recognizing certain behaviors that we engage in that just give us literally, they don't give us that dopamine, they don't give us the satisfaction. And you kind of get to direct that a little bit. Like, we are always choosing in some small or big way, like where we're putting our focus, and a meta awareness of where you're putting it is basically like the skill, I guess, we try to cultivate.
Absolutely. Right? I mean, that is the skill of reality jumping.
Yeah.
But a big part of awareness is, it's not necessarily even just choosing where you're putting your awareness, it's choosing how you react to things.
Well, I mean, that's the whole, you can place your awareness and summon forth and manifest a wonderful, beautiful utopian reality for yourself. But if you don't react the right way to it, that shit,
you'd still be miserable.
It's not, you might even be there. You might be even in it.
I think we are in it.
Thought.
Of
course we are.
Yeah.
Of course, if you've ever in your life had the ability to feel as though everything is perfect, that place is still here. It didn't go away. Still here. It's
I'm a big believer in that. I think that the fall from the Garden of Eden is an atemporal moment. We're still in it. We just decided we weren't in it. That's the fall.
And we move in and out of it. But here, because of duality, because of this binary separation of so many forces, it's really hard to stabilize. You like the saints and the mystics who really genuinely seem to be able to do that, and we're really actually doing. There are not that many of them. It's not like we have a preponderance of people. I'm sure there's more than we know about, of course, but like, it's not littered with like tales of people who are able to maintain unity consciousness.
Oh, but we got tons of, it's okay because we got tons of people on social media who are now ascended masters and want to tell us all about their realization.
I never understood. I mean, I get the impulse, I guess, like when you have them, like if someone takes ayahuasca or has a profound LSD or mushroom trip, you come out of it and a natural inclination is to want to share the experience and like kind of bring people into the community. Get that impulse.
That
to
never
then
works, but yeah.
Identify yourself with that. And I mean, who just wants to be preaching that shit constantly? And I ironically say this because I do with my podcast in many ways over and over again talk about the same type of shit. And I just fundamentally don't view it as preaching because I'm not trying to convince anyone. Like if people hear it and they run with it and they test it and they prove it to themselves, wonderful. That is my intention. But like someone who is vehemently against whatever I'm talking about, cool.
Yeah.
Turn the channel. Like, totally
exactly.
Cool. I don't need.
No, that's always like when people get on my case about, you know, anything that I say, it's just like, okay, well, just don't listen to my show. It's like, this is easily solved. Life is short. There's so many things you could be doing. It's like, if you don't like me, my fifis are not hurt. Okay. Like, I'm not the guy for you. That's fine with me.
Yeah, you're also joining the majority in my case. Trust me, way more people don't listen to me.
Yeah,
you don't even have to feel like there's any like movement galvanizing.
No, definitely. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, oh man, it is our current moment though is very disorienting and often disheartening, I have to say, just because there's so many fast movements of people choosing different realities and people are in survival mode still. I think, you know, they're very reactive.
I generally move through these global shifts a little bit like I don't get freaked out by the external stuff so much. The stuff that really gets to me in my life is like my personal machinations and just like stuff like that. The outside stuff, it like I find it generally entertaining. Like here's also the luxury I have, especially like just looking at like the FTX situation. I never in a million years would have been affected by that. It's just not something that could have realistically happened to me. So I can take the stance from afar and be like, holy shit, this is going to be a great movie. Like, this is going to be incredible. Jonah Hill is going to play fucking Sam Bankman-Fried. Like, we love this shit. But like, ultimately, like a lot of this stuff, the Trump stuff, all of this stuff. When Trump, the day he got elected, I was upset, but I was like, I don't think this is going to be as big of a deal. That was my stance as I thought it was. From that day on, I moved gradually to the place where I found it legitimately entertaining.
Oh, yeah.
Like people.
Yeah.
And then when you can get to that place with most things.
You have to just to keep your sanity. You know, it's like after.
I think that's true too.
Yeah, you know, it's like after Trump was elected, I felt like I've been hit in the head, and I spent literally like I was punch drunk, and I spent the first 2 weeks just like yelling at people on social media nonstop, and just like raging and like just like a little kid running at a wall and hitting his head over and over again for like 2 weeks, and then I burned out on that, and I was like, okay, this is actually pretty hilarious if you really
look at it. If you really think about it, and like that, really, people be like, well, this is government, he's in charge of nukes, their state secrets. Like,
it's awful. Guys, I mean, life is a farce. You know, it's like King Lear or something like that. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But you can't. I mean, so many people were in that zone. A lot of people are still there.
They're
like,
still
who's
there.
with me? I would crawl over barbed wire and broken glass with no shirt on to vote against Trump. He's the tangerine Hitler and all of this stuff. It's just like, okay, we've heard it. We know.
He's like a boorish galoof. That's like he's nothing more or less.
He's
than
literally
that
like your racist dad that yells at Fox News while eating fried chicken.
Yeah, and it's like, guess what? That's an archetype in modern culture. They'll have tarot cards with Trump on them in the future, looking back where he embodies a certain type of particular energy.
This is going to be an unpopular opinion, but speaking of consciousness projections, you could not get a better symbol of what America is than Trump. You really could not. If you really objectively look at America, I know people have all these like you know, highfalutin heroic ideals about America and Madi Day and all this stuff. It's like America to me is like people pushing each other out of the way to get free samples at Costco. Like that's America, right? And it's like if you really pooled together our collective bullshit, you would get Trump. It's like you would have to like invent him if he didn't exist. It's like
And you hopefully
So
should be able to see the parts in yourself where there are probably very few people go like, yeah, I have parts of me that are like Trump. But I guarantee there are more of us who have those qualities than we'd like to admit. The just ability to exaggerate innocuously, like for no reason sometimes, things like everyone has done that. There's not one person who
I'm
didn't
the
like
best at everything. Just ask
just
anyone.
like no one stays in that
No
vibe
one's
like
better
him
at
because
this
it's
than me.
ridiculous. But like also like I love that when he does that shit. To me, it's the funniest thing because like it's like an Andy Kaufman thing. Like
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
even know if like he has the ability to hear how ridiculous it is, or if he knows that it's that ridiculous and he's doing it because he knows no matter what, it still works. Like there's this.
The
I
fact
don't
that
know.
you can't tell is what makes it funnier. Yeah,
It does.
there's like a certain lack of self-awareness. And then like
Yeah.
you're like, wait, this guy has nukes. And then at a certain point you just gotta be like, well, that makes it even funnier in a
Yeah.
certain way. I mean,
And I
it's
guess
horrible, but like you gotta keep your sanity.
And like I do think like as much as the shadowy, dark, evil cabal of people who run society are, they don't want it to blow up. So I
No.
do believe there is a self-preservation aspect of this reality. Like I was joking about this as much as you can joke about it with my wife. Like, you know, I was like, it would be a shame if we do end in nuclear Armageddon because I didn't see that coming. I firmly believe that's not really going to happen. And it would just be like the nukes are coming and be like, damn, I was really fucking wrong on this shit.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Did not really have the power to control as much as I thought I did.
No, I had a really scary moment like 2 weeks ago where I woke up from a nap just like with the thought in my head like Putin's going to drop a nuke. And like I hadn't been thinking about it at all, like it wasn't a thing. And then I looked it up, and like I just got on the news, and like people, that was when people were first starting to talk about that being a possibility.
Yeah,
and I was just like, it was just like that eeriest thing. It's just
like it's hard for me. Like I get the like going out with the bang type of thing. Like if you're gonna die, if you're really sick, or like you know you're going out, like why not blow it all up? What a like mark on society. But I ultimately don't think anyone really truly wants to embody that much of the destroyer. I am destroyer of worlds energy as an individual. That's a little too heavy of an archetype for people. Like you don't want to be Brahma. You're okay.
Well,
You're
you know,
right
I'm also, I mean, in line with the stuff we've been talking about, I'm not, I'm not necessarily a big theory in individual actors. I think that even like people like Trump are manifested by big groups of consciousness.
Collective consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, they're
force them. Yeah,
yeah, and then that's the thing about America. Everyone's like, "Oh, fucking Trump." It's like, well, like you're manifesting him. I mean, like that's the thing with, you know, liberal people freaking out about him 24/7. It's like, why are you putting so much energy into him?
Why?
Like you love this guy. Why don't you marry him? You know, it's like, why do you think about him 24/7? Like my line with Trump was always like, Trump doesn't get to live in my head. He owns enough real estate as it is. He doesn't get free rent. You know, it's like. But like it's like people, he's like the, you know, it's like the kayfabe in pro wrestling. He's like the evil wrestler that everyone loves to hate. It's like, oh, this fucking guy.
And then there are those of us, I guess, who are looking at it and go, this is wrestling, this is scripted, and it's kind of funny. And it's like, you know, maybe not the thing I watch all the time, but if I see like some weird shit, like someone jumping off like a steel cage, you know, like I'm going to fucking pay attention for a second. But I don't know, like his energy to me is usually entertaining. If he was president again, I wouldn't lose my shit. I don't think
a lot of people would.
Well, oh my God, people will. And I think that would also be equally entertaining. I don't think we're going to have another like insurrection if that's people like that was weird to me too.
What,
And like,
what were your
denying,
thoughts on what were your thoughts on that?
I mean, I was like most people, I was just like, what the fuck is going? Like, this is insane. Cause I did realize like this is not a joke. These people aren't joking. Like they may be, you know, goofy and weird, but like they're in the motherfucking. I grew up outside of DC. Like I know those buildings very well. I protested outside of the Supreme Court. I'm ashamed to say when Al Gore with the Chads in 2000. Like I've been to these places. Like it's crazy that someone's in Nancy Pelosi's office, right? It's crazy that there are people like trying to find Mike Pence to hang him, to lynch him. Like this is mind-blowing. I feel terrible for the police, and it's rare. I'm not like a police lover by most ways, like they're pretty destructive. But like, can you imagine being a Capitol Guard dude? Like, dude, first of all, you're probably like not doing that well in life. It's not a high paying job. You're guarding this thing. You probably say hi to the senators and the Congress people, right? It's a normal job most days of your life. Then all of a sudden you have all of like, you know, tens of thousands of deranged, crazy Midwestern white people storming your fucking doors. Like, what is going on? Like, that's crazy to me that was something that happens. But again, on the novelty curve,
I mean, you got to admit the fact that there was a furry Viking is pretty
of
fucking
course.
Funny. It's pretty fucking
that's what everyone
funny.
remembers too. That's what everyone. The first thing you say when anyone says January 6th is not this marked black day on American history. It's the dude with the Viking horns and the furry stuff standing at the thing. Like, that's it. That's what people actually remember. That's the optics of the situation, for better or for worse. And people didn't make it like that. That guy made it like that.
People forget that, you know, the run up to that is that the government had shut down everything. They had ruined people's lives. There was mass violence in cities all over America. Things were on fire. People's livelihoods, everything they'd spent their whole life working for, was being destroyed overnight. And you had like basically people like Kamala Harris egging it on and saying they were going to raise funds for protesters and saying like, well, you know, and also that suddenly the COVID rules were suspended because mass violence is okay. And that was directed at normal people. But now all they talk about is, well, a furry got into the White House. It's like, yes, a furry got into the White House, and I'm sure it was very bad, but
the problem is that that's how we work right now, because we're in such a visual, like we're moving to VR. We're trying to immerse ourselves as much as possible in like the visual, you know, audio as well, but visual realm of, and what we see, we remember. It's hard. Like until you just mentioned it, I didn't think about the context of it at all. Right. It didn't like,
it never escaped me for a moment.
It's because you're probably a much deeper thinker than I am.
Well,
and
no, not at all. It's because I was caught up in the violence in California and had to flee. I had to leave the state.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah,
that'll do it for. But I mean, like, to me, I was in upstate
There's nothing
New
deep
York
about it.
And international. That's true. Like, I basically was just like immune from most of this stuff, for lack of a better word. And to me, I always had the luxury of looking at it kind of like from afar, which is I'm very comfortable with that type of relationship with politics and those types of cultural things. Now, am I comfortable with a government imposing its will on individuals? Not really, but for me personally, I did more international traveling during the pandemic than I had done in the previous 15 years of my life. So like, I, for whatever reason, found a way to circumvent which were supposed to be the most restrictive times. In some ways, when I was here, they were. But again, as we mentioned, I didn't mind it that much. It wasn't like that big of an imposition to me. But I get for people who really, they need that in their lives, how that pent up kind of energy needed to be expressed. But yeah, all I remember is the Viking guy with the fur.
Right,
I mean, that's all I probably will remember.
Well,
you pointed this out.
in urban Los Angeles, I mean, like in urban Los Angeles, it was a little different. It was like they shut down the state. Nobody was allowed to work, yet they changed the law so that any crime under $1,000 was okay. So people are just stealing everything left and right. There's just mass scale, just heroin use, homelessness, just everything's falling apart. Things are on fire all the time. The air was filled with so much smoke that it looked like Hong Kong, and then, or excuse me, not Hong Kong, you know, like Shanghai or something like that, where you see the pollution so bad that the skyscrapers disappear. That's what was going on. Meanwhile, the governor is going out, like, you know, going to dinner without a mask. They're changing the rules constantly, and it was just like Lord of the Flies. And it wasn't just Lord of the Flies. It was like it felt like Lord of the Flies that was intentionally being. It was like Batman Begins or something. It's like they're like, or Dark Knight Rises, like they're intentionally trying to create this murderous situation to just like, for whatever reason. I mean, the only logical thing that I can think of was just to chase people out so they could get the real estate cheaply. But it was a nightmare. I mean, I've never seen anything like that. And I'm very bitter about it. And, you know,
because you lived there for so long.
Yeah, I grew up there. That's my home. You know, and I left my friends and family to get away with from it, and lost my girlfriend in the process. You know, but it's like I had to get away from it, and now I'm much more comfortable. But is just a nightmare. And the worst
That's
part, of
great.
course, is the gaslighting, where people don't believe you when you tell them.
Well,
Right? It's
I
like,
mean,
well, what are you, a Trump person? Like, no,
but
this shit is real.
what kind of like that to me it's weird that people would challenge someone's personal experience. Like if you're following like talking points or something like that, but like when someone's like, no, this is how it was. Like
Well,
where
cognitive dissonance is a real thing. I mean, people in California have convinced themselves that it's like that cartoon of like the dog in the burning room. Like, this is fine.
exactly.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's just that shit is crazy to me. I mean, LA is also LA is just such a wild place. Like
It wasn't always,
California,
it was really nice until Gavin Newsom became governor, and then it turned overnight.
it was it really that like that radical of a shift? Because I've heard
Yes, it
different things
was.
about him.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
I've heard that.
was.
I've
Yes, it
heard that.
was. It was
So
night and
what's his
day.
deal? What's his deal?
Other than wanting to be president.
Like it's just all like a political theater and maneuvering to be able to be at the highest. I mean, I guess that's what people do.
I don't know. I mean, I think that, I don't know. I mean, the guy's a clown, but people believe they're doing the right thing. I don't believe in people are like scheming and trying to be evil. It's like people have a certain, he has a certain approach that for him seems like the right one, but I don't know. I mean, I gave up trying to figure it out. I just needed to get away from it.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry you had to go through that. That sucks, man. Like I can't imagine being forced from a place that I like wanted to live in and grew up in and, chose to live in, being forced from it. I mean,
Yeah.
LA is also just like I had the luxury of spending a bunch of time there just before the pandemic, literally, I think a month before that February, I was still there. It's so cool. Like it's a really like magical,
Yeah, it is.
like
It's great.
freaky deaky place. Like it sucks that it and I noticed the first few times I had visited back 2019, 18, as an adult, like the homelessness thing was ramping up.
Yeah.
And you were like, I remember literally first time I got there, I was in like the art district. Like someone had a gallery they had built there near Koreatown or something. And there was a horseback police in LA, which is a weird enough sight
Yeah.
chasing a homeless person. And I was
that's
like,
ridiculous.
what the fuck is going on? And it's like, that's a weird thing I haven't seen.
Well, the thing about it, I mean, they talk about it like the homelessness crisis, and then it's like, you just sound like a dick, where it's like, oh, what, you don't like to see homeless people? Like, you fucking Richie McRich, like, oh, God. But no, that's not it at all. I mean, there were quote unquote homeless. A lot, basically, they just dumped the prisons out onto the street because they didn't want to pay it anymore. So they just like took they just dumped all these people out of the social services onto the street. That's been going on for a while, but it was a huge overnight thing. Everyone's on drugs.
Of course.
I would literally walk out of my house and somebody would be like wiping their ass with a whole thing of paper towels. I've
seen newspaper in New York.
Nice,
a woman, newspaper.
People are like shooting up literally under every single overpass. Like I was watching people shoot up in the neck.
Yeah.
Just like walking around with no clothes on, just like people who are off their lithium, or like need serious medication. They are non-functional human beings. And a lot are violent, and I would just get chased down the street by people just leaving the house. It's just like insanity. And prior to that, like I've been to India many times, and I always said, it's like, look, America's great no matter where you go. It's not going to be like somewhere like India, even the poorest places. Well, now that's not the case because LA is very much like that. And there's just a fundamental disconnect between the Gavin Newsoms and Nancy Pelosi's of the world and the way that people actually live. If you live in a gated community, you just don't see it.
Well, that's the thing. That's what's so unique about LA in particular too. It's such a sprawled out city.
Yeah.
Like people who have only like been to New York or like a condensed city, you don't understand. You have to drive.
It's like a country.
It's like a country. And so like there are areas where literally it's a war zone, but then you go somewhere else and it's like, you're in the hills and like there's not a homeless person within, 2 miles.
That evaporated there during the pandemic. It was literally everywhere. And the air was so toxic to breathe, partly because of the fires that were happening in Oregon and things like that. But you couldn't get, it's like, even if, like I realized at one point, like even if you like bought a house for $100 million, you were like certified baller status, like David Geffen up in the hills, you still couldn't escape like the toxic air. It's just awful. I've heard that it's better now. I went back like a year ago, and it wasn't quite as nightmarish, but honestly, it was still really bad. And
I haven't been in about 3.5 years.
That's pretty much the time period that it's been collapsing in.
I got in right before the shit show. Well, I mean, I love California.
Yeah.
Like, I love Southern California. I think it's, I mean, there's, unfortunately, part of the homelessness problem there too, and it has been because there's always been a large homeless population, is like, if you're homeless, it's not the worst place to be.
Oh,
it's
no.
Like,
you're not gonna freeze to death.
You get on a bus to LA, you save up whatever scratch you have to get out there. Like, there's probably a life just in terms
No, it's so crazy though. I mean, it's like everyone's on meth, and there's like some new form of meth that everyone was taking that literally just like scrambles people's brains. And like they were getting, there's like Black Plague on Skid Row, there's leprosy, there's like these like diseases that you couldn't even call them third world diseases because they've eradicated them in the third world.
Needle sharing. I mean, that's how you do it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So for me, it just seemed like at a certain point, it just seemed like just malevolent and targeted, which is maybe true, maybe not. But it was just like, it literally felt like I was living in a Batman movie where they were trying to collapse the city for whatever financial reasons.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it really is. So going through that, and then, oh no, there's a furry. It's like, okay, well, what did you just do to everyone else? But yeah, it is bad. It's a dangerous situation. Yeah, totally.
It was to me also like the pandemic lockdowns and the way that local and federal authorities kind of were so easily able to impose lockdowns, like just like it's pretty nuts. Like people forget
globally, not just federally, worldwide.
No. Local, yeah, like worldwide, of course. I mean, some countries took it a little bit differently, but I remember flying out in JFK to Istanbul in the height of the pandemic in 2020, and it was such a weird scene to see JFK like that, because there were only Air France and Istanbul was Turkish Airlines was running Air France to get people back to France who were French, or Americans back to the United States. And Istanbul was just like a regular airline. And I was just like, what is going on? And then you get to Istanbul and it's kind of like the United States. Now, people should realize that it is an authoritarian regime. Like, that should not be lost. People do get knocks on the door if they say something bad about their local political leader. That is a thing. But on all visual optics, it's just like here. Like, it's a pretty liberal and free city, even though there's a huge Muslim and Islamic influence because of like strategic, moves by Erdogan. It's pretty similar in a lot of ways. It's weird. And you would see the same schism without the vitriol, I will say. People were still mad. I don't want to make it seem like it's that qualitatively different, but there were the masked people, there were the not masked people. There were the people who thought this was nothing, there were people who thought this was everything. Like, that existed, but it wasn't like this clash. And also, Turkey just lied. They also just were like, no, it's not here. What do you mean?
It's like Russia.
No one's dying. Yeah. What do you mean? And like, some ways, listen, I've seen an authoritarian regime in the country it's run. They got really nice bridges. They got really nice infrastructure. There are rules to it.
You don't want to ask how they built them. Don't ask why.
But there is a functionality to it. And so, like, it's just weird. There's different approaches and how everyone wants to do this. I'm still happy I live in this country. I am less happy about some of the things that go along with it. But it is still a relatively free place. Like, we can move to different states and we do different shit.
Yeah, and I think this has been hopefully a wake-up call for people. It's like, freedom ain't free, as they say. It's like, this is, you see how fast it can go away. It's like, I just pulled up, you've probably heard this before, Frank Zappa very famously said in the 80s, this quote, "The illusion of freedom will continue as long as it's profitable to continue the illusion. At the point where the illusion becomes too expensive to maintain, they will just take down the scenery, they will pull back the curtains, they will move the tables and chairs out of the way, and you will see the brick wall at the back of the theater." I thought about that a lot in 2020.
It's weird that we needed something like that to fully kind of, or not we needed it, but like a large enough subset of people had to have. I hope that the lessons that we learned, that we shouldn't be so willing to just kind of like give up fundamental things. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to
Yeah.
suggest that people should go out there with a deadly disease but like we can look back now with enough even objective scientific work
I hope
and be
so.
like,
It's still pretty close. We're still pretty close to it.
I know. Well, and also I still know people who are like, if you say you're unvaccinated, like really get angry.
Well, that's the
You're
thing. I
problem.
mean, like I feel like I lost my trust in just about everything during this period. But like, for me, the whole thing about like, oh, well, Great Reset, Klaus Schwab, WEF, all that, like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, but it's a bit of a non-starter just because, the real realization for me is like totalitarianism is not like a dude in a black robe. Like maybe that guy's there, like Klaus Schwab. It's everyone around you exerting social pressure on you 24/7. And like you say, like maybe we needed this as a wake up call to value freedom. It's like, well, for most people, like they turned into like, little Mussolinis, like all of them, it was just a nightmare, like invasion of the body snatchers. So
I don't know what happened there. I just remember people.
It's just mass psychology. I mean, it's probably the same way it's been throughout history.
It just was so weird to me that this became such a big issue so quickly. I mean, maybe it was the anti-vax people. Their consciousness needed that issue to be blown up because it's something I had thought about so little, even with kids. Like I vaccinated my kids with all of the things. I never thought about any of this stuff. And then just seeing, I'm not against someone who decides that they look at what they look at and say, I want to get vaccinated or I want to vaccinate my kid and I should get all the boosters. I think if you come to that conclusion, you're confident with all the information out there. It's not my role to come and say, oh, you shouldn't do that. But for me, my stance was always, hey, listen, this shit is happening pretty fucking fast.
Yeah.
And usually when we develop vaccines, I think they take a little bit longer to like kind of like roll this stuff out. And yes, it's a great American ingenuity and, Pfizer and all these companies can come up with amazing things. Johnson and Johnson. Oh yeah. Okay. There were shit going on with them. And if the chance isn't like really, really, really close to zero, meaning like not 10,000 weird things, not like I'm going to pass for now because I also will then implement a strategy that makes sense for me.
Right.
And like,
well, the thing is, it's like I agree. I mean, it's like, I feel like people should have a right to choose for themselves is a pretty fucking basic common sense thing. It's like, other people's bodies are not your property. You would think that's a pretty basic common sense fucking thing. But you remember that whole moment where it was like, well, it's a Biden. It's a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Well, now it's coming out that Pfizer didn't even test the fucking thing for transmission, and it doesn't prevent transmission. And now it's just like, oh well, Yeah, and I knew that was going to happen.
Of course,
I got vaccinated,
to someone,
but it's like you could see this coming.
If you saw, and I always say, like, if my wife was wanted to get vaccinated, I probably would have been vaccinated. I literally don't think that's going to be the thing that takes me down or fucks me up ultimately. But if I don't have to do it, like I don't get the flu shot because it's last year's flu.
Right.
Sure, it may be going around, but I'm not inoculating my sense against the new viruses. So I don't need to put that shit in my body. Listen, I'm not like the purist of what I put into my body. I eat a lot of shit. I'm just saying, like, I don't need to add to it for stuff I don't know what's going on. And I certainly don't want to inject it in my fucking body. Like,
I think the whole thing was just, I mean, no matter what side of the fence you're on that, and people obviously have very strong opinions about this, it's like, you got to admit that just like, if you look at that, like that was objectively fucked and terrifying. It's like the government telling you have to genetically modify yourself.
No, we're in the minority for believing that, though. I'm sure you know that. I mean, I
don't think so. I think that I don't know.
I mean, I would hope not, but I mean, at least seemingly on the internet, like, I mean, I have on synchronicity, I talk about all the shit we're talking about, all the weird kind of like mystical stuff. I would talk about vaccines. Inevitably, there would be an outcropping of people. I would talk about Donald Trump. Inevitably, and we're aligned seemingly metaphysically in every single way. But like, man, you mentioned the wrong thing about the vaccines, and I'm really like very neutral about it. I am not saying you're an idiot if you
right.
I just came to and I don't challenge your identity. And I think if someone if it came out that like this, I was totally wrong and this was an incredibly effective thing, and like 99% of people never got COVID and never spread COVID, or like even 80%, give me like a high percentage where I can like take it, then I'd be like, you know what, maybe I probably should have got it and I'll maybe get it next time. But it's not like the data is going in that direction.
Well,
like you said,
yeah,
Pfizer's like, oh yeah, we didn't really ever test if people would spread this or not. We were just assuming it would protect enough people enough that this wasn't going to be an issue. And I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
I don't think
I think, I mean, we're still so close to this event. I think that, like I posted on Twitter a while ago, it's just like, you know, we've been through, I wouldn't even say like a traumatic event. Like this has been like a world war that everyone went through. And it's like, there's a lot of, I mean, it was fast, it was confusing, it was heartbreaking in many ways. And, you know, it's going to take a while to process that trauma. But I think as that starts to unwind, assuming we don't go for another round of craziness, then
we will.
Yeah.
You know, we will. Like you can sense it too. It might not be a virus. It might not be a pandemic, but I do feel we'll probably have I think it's going to be the financial stuff just because they're so clearly setting the stage. And when I say they, I don't even mean they. I mean us. We're willingly creating these situations. Just for me, I view the imminent collapse of the global economic system to not be as catastrophic in a sense that it's going to be like flipped overnight, but it probably is going to create enough opportunity for people like me who like kind of understand there is opportunity when things shift a little bit. It doesn't have to be everyone's shared vision of effective altruism, which by the way, best con ever. That is the best, most spiritual bypass shit ever. Oh yeah, I need all the money because I'm going to give away the most. Meanwhile, can I get a $60 million penthouse?
Yeah. Funny how that worked out.
To my penthouse. I love it. It's so perfectly like, it's so great. It's such a movie. I mean,
yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, like I've been on the precipice of global collapse so many times, and it never happens. So it
won't happen like that. It won't. No, the financial systems are shifting. That this wealth that boomers accumulated and that generation all over the world accumulated does need to move. It does need to shift into different hands, and it's not going to be all through nepotism. There are going to be people who maybe were born into a very wealthy family who start getting involved with crypto, start getting involved with NFTs, and maybe shift some of that money through bad investments to people who are more technologically savvy or are plugged into a community that is more altruistic in reality. I do think that is underway. I don't think it's like the WEF's vision, you know, of like the next industrial revolution.
Well, these are just, I mean, these are inevitable movements, though. I don't think there's going to be any type of collapse. And we were talking about like Shiva the Destroyer and individuals being manifested. But one thing, you know, it's like the other thing is like you got to remember the reality always manifests people to make things go right as well. One of the most hilarious, you know, as like a backstop, and one of the most hilarious examples of that I just found out about. So did you know that we almost went to thermonuclear world war in 1999?
No.
Okay, so when NATO
I was probably on acid, and I definitely remember being in 1999 and having acid trips where I thought nuclear war was. That was
a good year to be on acid. So, when NATO pulled out of Kosovo in 1999, the Russians showed up to move in as we were pulling out. So the U.S. and England, and General Wesley Clark wanted to fight the Russians and just like go straight into conflict with them. And do you know and this would inevitably have escalated into war between NATO and Russia and probably nuclear exchange. And do you know the single person who stopped this?
Is it a politician?
No, it was James Blunt.
How?
That James Blunt.
How?
Okay, check. In 1999, Blunt volunteered to join a Blues and Royals squadron deploying with NATO to Kosovo. Initially assigned to carry out reconnaissance of the North Macedonia-Yugoslavia border, Blunt's troop worked ahead of the front lines, locating and targeting Serbian forces for the NATO bombing campaign. On June 12, 1999, the troop led a 30,000-strong NATO peacekeeping force from the North Macedonia border, towards Pristina International Airport. However, a Russian military contingent had moved in and taken control of the airport before his unit's arrival. American NATO commander Wesley Clark ordered that the unit forcibly take the airport from the Russians. General Mike Jackson, the British commander, refused the order, telling Clark that they were not going to start World War III for you. Blunt has said that he would have refused to obey such an order if General Jackson had not blocked it. So what they're leaving out here is that James Blunt specifically was basically in charge of the actual troops on the ground and specifically ordered them not to fight the Russians. So James Blunt stopped World War III. That's reality for you.
Well, that makes it's on the novelty curve. It's right in line where we are now. That's totally makes sense. But holy shit, it is disturbing. I guess it's like a virus, like that does get expunged or you get immune from. But the desire to start that engagement with the Russians there, right?
I don't want to fight the Russians. I've only had good experiences with Russians.
Yeah, their girls are really attractive. I'm genetically almost 100% Ukrainian. I don't have any real cultural connection there, but both sides of my grandparents, their parents are from Kiev. So I don't have beef with any people. The Ukraine thing is weird. I'm interested to get your take on it because I don't have any. I stand with Ukraine flags. I don't have let's exclusively destroy the monolith of Russia. I think what Russia's doing is wrong. It doesn't seem like you should invade other countries. Strategically, I can make an argument for why Putin is doing that and how the West is kind of agitating and not giving him a way to get out of it. But the Zelensky aspect of it is what I find most fascinating because he was a comedian, he was an entertainer. And then
have you seen the video where he was playing a piano with his dick?
No.
Yeah. Look it up on YouTube.
Oh my God. That's
one of his comedy routines.
It seems like he's playing a role here, and I would never want to eliminate someone's ability to transition into a new version of themselves. But the political posturing and how we funnel this aid to Ukraine, I don't know. It just seems a little weird to me. It doesn't feel like we're getting the whole picture. Why would we be, obviously? But something feels very weird to me about the whole situation. All I read every day is Ukraine is, taking stuff that was captured and they're doing really well. And on one level, it makes me feel good because it's the narrative of this war, which I'm very detached from, like most Americans, truthfully. Yay, the bad guys are losing ground and the underdogs are coming back. But on another level, I'm why? Why is this what really is going on here? Can't know.
Let me take a leak and then I will give you my take. Yeah, this is an interesting one. My summation of the world at this point is that it's all about real estate. I think war is always about real estate and it is about resources on that real estate, but ultimately it's about real estate. In which light I've often thought about the pandemic driving everyone out of work and then BlackRock Capital buying all the houses up.
Yeah.
Funny how that worked out, especially in California where everyone was all, driven out of their homes by multiple things, rioting, homelessness, fires, not being able to work, etc. But if you look at it, I end up talking about this on every podcast now. I've been reading a bunch of stuff by Timothy Snyder, who's a historian of Eastern Europe, and he has a lot to say about it. The crazy thing is, if you look at it historically, World War II was fought over Ukraine. And a lot of the history coming out, it's like America doesn't really understand World War II because it was a European war. It was an Eastern European war. A lot of it happened behind the Iron Curtain and we never saw it. So including the Holocaust, almost all happened behind the Iron Curtain. So we never saw the worst parts of it. But a big part of why the Holocaust happened was Hitler driving east because he wanted to conquer Eastern Europe, basically in the same way that the Americans did the Indians, and take it all as farmland. And specifically, the reason why Ukraine is so important is they have this thing called Black Earth, which is super fertile soil that will grow stuff really fast.
Yeah.
And I don't understand what it is. There's only a few places in the world that has it. Actually, there's some in Texas and a few other places. But anything you plant there grows really fast. So Ukraine is strategically important because it's where all the world's wheat is grown, or a big chunk of it.
Huge, like 60, something insane.
Oh,
Something
really?
like I don't know if it's 60. I could be wildly making that, but it's something like way more than you would think in terms. It doesn't really come here, I don't think, but like for Europe and Asia,
I think a lot of
it's
it does.
pretty
It
much
does come here.
they go through the strait. Also, that region is really unique geographically. Those seas there and how the continents and countries come together.
Mm.
It's because Turkey is right there too. I haven't been to that part of it, but like it's a very interesting place in the world that we probably as Americans overlook. But yeah, it is. Keep going.
Right. Like nobody even thought about it until this happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, reading about a lot of, like, I literally end up talking about this on every podcast. This book, Bloodlands, which I highly recommend, that he wrote, which was about just all the carnage that happened in between Germany and Russia in the 30s and 40s. It's the most brutal book I've ever read. It will fuck with you. It is.
What's it called?
Bloodlands.
Bloodlands.
And it's a history of, basically it's a history of the 30s and 40s, of starting with the famine in Ukraine, going through the Holocaust, from the perspective of just like the human suffering, like just the perspective of like it was fucking ass to live in this part of the world in these 2 decades, like not telling it basically from both sides. Like basically these people were getting it from both ends, not telling just the Soviet history or just the Nazi history. And it's just, when you put all that stuff together, which apparently no one had really done till he wrote this book, it's just it's staggering. Just wow. Like when you put together the famine in Ukraine, the cannibalism that happened under communism, and then you add in the death camps, you add in the war, you add in the Polish ghetto. You know, it's just like, it's fucked. That's all. Like, we could talk about it forever.
I like that you focus on all the light and positive things in life.
I read about this stuff for fun. No, like, yeah. No, I tell people, like, you know, I just code all day and work on spreading magic, and then for fun I read about genocide. Yeah.
I forgot you were coding. That's so fucking smart and awesome. It's like a pipe dream of mine. Like literally classic. Like I'll get high and be like, I should code, and then actually try.
Should. It's not hard.
I don't though. I know it's not hard, and I really do know it is something that you can make your mind find engaging. It's just I usually give up just after like a set period of time of like function calls and things like that. And like I have enough that like my coding knowledge is such that for the things I need it for, like I can look through, I can interact with an Etherscan contract, right? I can look through and see if there's like clearly something wrong or how to invert, you know. That's pretty much the extent of where I can go with it. But I mean, It's so smart. It's like one of the smartest things you can do right now.
Well, for me, I mean, I guess we're tangenting off genocide, but maybe that's a good thing.
No.
For me, I mean, is it? Maybe if you're coding crypto. Yeah, I mean, well, I went through this experience of basically fleeing a war zone in California, and then, you know, I moved to Texas, and then my relationship failed when I got here, so I just lost everything, and it was utterly traumatic. And like, I was like, okay, well, I can either completely lose my mind, or I can find something to focus on. And so I was like, I'm going to focus on coding because nothing in my life is giving me a sense of control over my life. Mm-hmm. And that is just psychological death, as we all know. As we all, I hope, know, it's like, if you're in terrible situations, find something that you can feel like you have control, that gives you control over your life, even if it's a small thing.
Even if it's small, totally.
So for me, it's just been like this, it's literally every day has been, okay, I can wake up and think about everything that's happened and everything that I've lost. I can think about the government. I can think about vaccines. I can think about all this shit. Or I can, and I know if I do that, I'm just going to get angrier and angrier and angrier all day, and it's not going to go anywhere. Or I can just focus on code. Right. Yeah. So that's what I've been doing.
That's super awesome, because that's like the best alchemy anyone can have in life. It's like the I Ching flip, right? Like the I Ching, when you get to like a maximum hexagram, it flips to the other side. It's like this quick shift into like the exact opposite.
I don't know if
energy.
it's a quick shift. It's just, well, for me, it's just like a survival decision. It's like,
but it is a pivot. It is. If there was a moment where you decided that I am going to do this thing,
there was.
and then you did it from there. I mean, that's literally how quick of a shift. It might have been all the things in the world leading up to that, like, but it's
well, I
just
mean,
at the actual.
Yeah.
That's bad. It's because, dude, I've tried to code 2 times.
I recommend serious trauma. It's quite helpful.
Really? Well, that'll propel anyone to anything in life. I mean, I look back at any of mine, and yeah, those are like, they're the worst and best times of your life where you are in the future, usually. And you can usually retrospectively look at them and hopefully find some real function to them, because otherwise I think then you just fall into like this dystopian, like nihilistic.
Yeah.
And that happens to people. And then Jordan Peterson comes along, and next thing you know. But the thing is like, there is like a tremendous amount of power in like taking that situation and flipping it into probably the most logical, analytical, and really like well thought out plan, right? Like you are genuinely.
I mean, I did think it out in the sense it's like, well, I kind of did this analysis where it's like, well, it's looking like whatever happens, like, whatever happens one way or the other, it looks like it's looking like people are going to be online a lot and indoors a lot. And so, but other than that, it's like I need, and I still do, I need something so all consuming that my mind will not start ruminating on this shit. Cause I can't control, I can't control Gavin Newsom. I can't control Pfizer. I can't control fucking Vladimir Putin. I can't control Biden. I can't control all the people around me. I can't control my close relations. It's like, and I will literally go insane if I start ruminating on that. So as I'm probably what I'm saying resonates with a lot of people. So for me, it's like, I need something that complicated to keep me absorbed. I mean, you could do it with lots of stuff. I was just like, I should probably do it on something that increases my survival chances in the future.
I mean, I guess when you look at it like that, I mean, I have definitely, for whatever reason, seemingly not consciously, chosen, parenting as my occupying force. Yeah. And it's just that's like, it was never a conscious kind of like plan, in the sense like I would like to tackle the goal of parenting. That seems, but I will say, like, it does take up a lot of your time, and it does teach you a fuckload about yourself.
I bet.
And I think one of the things that probably everyone is going through, regardless of whether it's coding or parenting or anything else you have going on, like, we are in a very transitional type of energy right now. Like that, I don't want that to be lost, because it seems to be a collective feeling that I hope I'm not perpetuating, that we stay in this transitory position forever. But we really are like moving through something that I sense we will turn a corner at some point. I don't know when, whether that's next year or in 4 years or whatever galactic situation needs to happen to make that a reality. But I do think the choices that we make now, and the type of energy we bring to the situations in our lives, recognizing we're probably not going to be like batting 1,000, we're probably going to make some mistakes, but bringing like a well-meaning and well-intentioned, like enjoyable vibe to things, that should pay off. I believe that pays off. It might be a little transactional for some people, but for me, that can only foster and like fractal out that type of energy, which I think if more people brought that and found themselves in positions where they feel like they could be like that, that would probably benefit our society and culture as much as anything else. So that's what I'm trying to do, to the best of my ability, in varying degrees of success, trying a bunch of different modalities. But I mean, I do feel like that seems to be like a very important thing for me to remember, because like, you can't control any of that shit you mentioned. Ultimately, you could sit down here, you could sit down, and fucking do a ritual or tap into the universal consciousness and move some things around. I'm going to leave that out there as a possibility. You're not going to do it, and I'm not going to do it, because what a waste of fucking time that is. So why don't you focus on the shit that you actually have control over, which is always, always your own perspective on things, and then modulate from there. And like, I think that's how you turn those types of situations that you went through, which sucks that you went through those. Like, that's bullshit in a lot of ways, but I just have a funny feeling you'll probably look back at that and be like, wow, that was kind of the best thing that ever happened to me. But that always seems
Hopefully.
unbelievable when the trauma. No, but you know this too, man. Like the trauma, like people who haven't ever had their like heart broken or something like that. Like when you get your heart broken, right? Which I think is a thing that probably everyone needs in life. You really don't like understand the pain of what that feels like
Right.
until you go through it. But when you look back on it, you are grateful in a weird way that it taught you something about yourself. And it may not be like the most graceful transition, but the bad shit often has this weird transitive
Yeah,
property
that's
of like
always true, but only
it
in
just
retrospect.
always knows. I know, and it's like the most annoying thing to say to someone
No,
who's
no,
like
no, it's
still in the
true.
midst of it. But it is true, and like it just seems like, especially since you made like a really good choice in coding, like I truly get it because I've attempted a couple of times, and I know if I put my mind to it, I could do it. It's just like
It's like any, you
I
just got
don't
to
do it.
slog at it every day. I mean,
It's a real commitment. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, I think it's simple though. It's just like all of us in one way or another have been put in a place of powerlessness in the last couple of years, one way or the other. And that's the worst. That's the worst feeling, like not having control over your life. So, hopefully
It
people
really
have figured
is.
this out in their own way. But, for me, it's just real simple. It's like you got to find something that you can control, not in like a fucking weird way, you know what I mean?
No,
Like,
not in
but,
no in a
but
good
something that
way.
gives you a sense of agency in your life. Because look, I mean, yeah, like I mean, even if I can't change things, I mean, it would be so easy to spend all day like scouring the internet trying to figure out what's going on, like all like what are all the angles on this, like what's happening, just like driving yourself fucking nuts. And
I'm
yeah,
curious to see what happens in the coming years, just because not even years, like months probably, enough people are realizing the jig is up there. Like it's the,
I don't know. I
in,
feel like people double down on cognitive dissonance.
I mean, it's weird because I always say, like, I know there are people, and I even have friends from like high school who I'm still friends with on Twitter, and like I see a variety of perspectives from people, but like, I don't know. It's such a ridiculous farce, like you said, of like a system and reality that like choosing to invest so much. Like people are sick of the Kardashians a little bit. I know not everyone is. They still have a booming media empire, but most, like she was getting booed at the game. Like people are like they're
Was that because
legitimately
of
like,
Kanye?
no, I don't even, no,
Yay, I
definitely
should
not.
say.
They're just sick of, they're just like, and I get this. I heard Tim Dillon talk about it and it made perfect sense because it's exactly what I was thinking. It's like there's only so much you can play on that type of thing. And they really did an amazing job of like playing on being very attractive, seemingly multi-versatile business people and moguls and entertainment beacons. It's like I respect that, but like you can't shove that in people's faces constantly because they're gonna revolt. It's like Gavin Newsom saying there's nothing wrong with the city when it's burning around you. It's
Right.
like there's a time and a place for that, and that period has probably passed where people are really going to be engaging with that. It's like finding out wrestling is fake. I remember when I was a kid and found out wrestling was fake. I wasn't long after where I lost interest in wrestling. It wasn't like
So
I'm
I have a
gonna
funny
still
story about that. I was like when I ended up in Kathmandu in Nepal in 2004.
cool.
Routed. I was supposed to go to India, but they couldn't fly me there, so they flew me to Kathmandu instead during the middle of a Maoist insurrection, where I
Holy
couldn't
shit.
leave suddenly couldn't leave the city because all the buses were being firebombed. And I ended up meeting shamans and undergoing shamanic training in the foothills of the Himalayas because I couldn't leave, so I might as well find something to do. True story. But I had this hilarious moment where I wrote about it in my first book. I had this hilarious moment where I was hanging out with these shamans in the mountains, and like they're like doing all these insane dances and rituals, and there's this magical reality and just this amazing stuff. And in my mind, I'm like, wow, is this real? Is shamanism real? And I'm and I'm asking them, like, is this real? Can you actually do supernatural things? So we're having that conversation. And then later they're like, pro wrestling, is it real?
Oh
Like
no.
they wanted to know if pro wrestling was real. It was like this hilarious like exchange moment where I'm like, is shamanism real? Well, is pro wrestling real?
You trade us pro wrestling, which is the most unreal thing ever that young children figure it out. But I could get like, you know what? Like if you're not from that culture, who knows? Like maybe they wouldn't think that people would go to such lengths, but I mean, it's still a booming industry.
Yeah, well, it's also pro wrestling's great, come on.
I used to love it when I was a kid. I just like I couldn't engage in the illusion. Like it didn't hold my interest enough where like I was gonna watch WrestleManias or ever ask like my parents to be like
people hitting each other with folding chairs was not enough to hold your attention.
I love the video games, those Ultimate Warrior. I mean, I used to play on Sega Genesis, the great WWF game. Like that stuff was fun, but like, Tatanka is probably where I got off the WWF bandwagon. Like I still call it WWF. Like they didn't have to change the name.
Yeah, that was my era also. Yeah.
If they Mandela effect on that it was never the WWF, I'm revolting. I'm going to the Capitol. I'm going to the Capitol in the Viking gear.
put on the fursuit. Yeah, so I don't know. That was a bunch of tangents. Ukraine, I mean, I guess that's what I was trying to say. It's like, Ukraine is a strategic objective. I understand Putin's position. I listen to Putin's interesting as a world leader because instead of like giving you like these folksy sayings like Biden, like, well, folks, sometimes you just gotta like, call the cows in when it's calling the cows in time. I don't know. That sounds like something Reagan would have said.
That does sound like something he would say, though. It's like,
it's just like, what, like, come on. But if you listen to like Putin will like sit there and explain the geopolitical like factors of something for like an hour, and it all makes sense. And it's like, but the thing is, it's like, I can understand your position and I can understand that your position makes total rational sense from your perspective. You want NATO off your doorstep. Yeah, they're playing. I mean, they were saying, oh, well, they're denazifying the Ukraine. Now they're saying they're de-Satanizing the Ukraine, which is even crazier.
They're saying that?
Yeah, they're saying there's Satanists in Ukraine, so they have to get all the Satanists out. It's propaganda. So, but it's like, I can understand. It's like, I have a very like Henry Kissinger outlook on the world. It's just like very realpolitik. It's like, I get it. Like, it's just power at the end of the day. I don't believe in like big political stories. I don't believe in political moralism. I just believe that in a sense, it's like I even had some respect for Kamala Harris at one point where she came out and said like, look, I know, right? Can you imagine? I'm all about breaking taboos.
That's my line. That's my fucking line. No, I get it.
Like Kamala Harris came out like several months ago and literally said like, look, water's a dwindling resource. In the future, the U.S. is going to have to go to war to get water. It's like no U.S. politician has ever said that we would proactively go to war for resources, even though that's obviously what's happening. No one has ever done that. So it's like, I kind of got to be like,
cool.
All right, like I respect that. It's honest, But anyways, it's like Putin, like I'll sit and listen to his stuff and it all makes sense, but it's like, but you're still on the other side. It's like at the end of the day, like I am an American, it's like Russia's geopolitical objectives are not in our interest, also, and I can understand them, but that doesn't mean, there's a level to warfare and conflict where it's like, you can understand your enemy, but they're still your enemy.
Yeah, it also seems tactically weak to be the person or nation forced into taking aggressive action because the optics of that in this age are so much more like back in the day, you could have shifted that narrative pretty quickly, right? In the papers and stuff. But nowadays, like you're getting like Twitter accounts and like videos on TikTok of like Ukrainian people shooting down the
yeah.
They didn't Photoshop that shit. Their video editing skills aren't that good. Like, it's pretty intense, like the how quickly TikTok information flows. Yeah, I mean, it's nuts. I've loved TikTok since before the pandemic. I was very in the minority in my age group, but I don't worry about giving my data to the CCP. I am not concerned about that impacting my life or my children's lives in the future. That may be naive. I find it to be relatively like they're doing a good job. Like their algorithms, like sometimes they're a little heavy-handed. Like I'll watch like one thing related to like some obscure like crime that happened because the interrogation was interesting. They just want to feed me like interrogation after interrogation after interrogation. But it's pretty and it's fast. They do it within like it's done within seconds. It's not even by a per video basis. They're basing it on how quickly you swipe.
Oh,
I
wow.
think it's really that simple. It's not like as algorithmically complex as people think. It's just buckets of interests and then based on speed and like likelihood and where and when in the video you swipe. But anyway, it's really good, and I find stuff that I am a little concerned that I found myself when I've been sick because my kids are sick at school and I tend to get this shit or whatever. Um, I will watch that shit for a long time where till the lady comes on, she's like, "Hey now, you've been watching TikTok too long. You may want to take a break." She's never a fun face to see. They picked the perfect woman. She's really innocuous, like very pleasant woman. I'm like, fuck. I've been watching for like an hour straight TikToks. But like, I don't know, like I'm not I don't think that this is something that like we have to be concerned about ultimately. I agree that like it doesn't look like the CCP or Putin. I'm going to tie these two together as the axis of evil in Americans' minds. I don't think this is something that like is out of hand as the way it's presented. I also understand and sympathize with a nation state trying to like exert its power. If you think your way is the best way, that's what you want to do. I don't think that's the right way of doing things. I don't necessarily approve of the United States engaging in these activities also with NATO, but like who the fuck do I know? Do I want to be the person
Right.
deciding who goes to war with people? Do I want to be the person who cleanses the system of this type of ideology? I'd probably lean more towards the side of just trying to like live a fulfilled and happy life individually before I'd want to take on the role of like and unfortunately I don't think those are the people in power. I don't think the most
No.
calm ascended, and that I don't think it's scary. I just think it's like this other layer of reality that unfortunately people in poor
Yeah.
and country parts of their
No, I
country like
mean,
they're it sucks balls that this happens because it is
well,
ultimately
particularly in Ukraine, I mean, a lot of these people have relatives on both sides.
of course they're
You know,
right next
they're
to
right
each
next to each other.
other.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that's always been the case. I mean, it's like nobody, like people are the same. I mean, like people are the same all over the world. They want to get stoned, hang out with their wife, play with their kids, watch TV, drink beer, go to bed, have a job that's not terrible. It's like people are not complicated and they're really not that different. And, um, and people just do not inherently want to kill each other in
Well,
large
that's why I was
numbers.
saying, yeah, like Putin seems to have the weaker hand in that sense because there's no denying that it was an aggressive move.
Oh yeah,
And
it's
they were
very
annexed,
clear.
even when they annexed Crimea, like
Right.
that was, and talk about geopolitical, like actual locuses of power, like that's a shipping, that's the most important part
Right.
of Ukraine, arguably. So, like you could see that he was kind of forced into something. And I saw something that I try to like read. I do stay engaged with this because I do find it as a layer of like theater and like it's actually wars. There are people going. There's real human interest here.
Yeah, the Reddit Foreign
I
Legion is over there.
Yeah, like it's crazy. Like Russia has never been traditionally a very powerful nation. It has at times intervened at crucial
The
moments in
Soviet
modern.
Union? I don't know. In the Cold War?
No, like they were, but like in a weird way where like their power was predicated on like not necessarily having more resources or land. Like they have oil, they have a large
They've
country,
got the biggest country in the world.
they have the biggest country in the world, but most of it is like pretty useless. Like you
Is
can't
it?
actually
I
do
don't
stuff.
actually know.
I mean, you can send like people to like Siberia to like do hard labor as punishment, but it's not like a place people want to go live. It's not like it's like Canada. If you see the
Oh
map
yeah,
of where
yeah.
people live in Canada, it's like no one's living up in Saskatchewan. It's like very few people, and you meet them, and you're like, holy
Yeah,
shit,
this is always like the argument like when people talk about overpopulation, it's like
no way.
have you ever flown over the US?
It's like
This is just endless or like you look at Canada, there's like 5 people, a Tim Hortons and some bears, It's just like
exactly. It's weird to me. They pivoted though from that. I saw that the other day that they were now pushing. I don't know who they are. The media. I was seeing a bunch of stories about how they were now concerned about population going extinct because people aren't having enough babies. I'm
that's the
like, I
thing. It's like
thought.
you can't take anything. Whatever everyone is screaming about this moment is going to change. It's going to flip at some point. This is just the Dow. Like
Hmm.
these narratives flip. You can't get too into them.
You just have to be entertained. I think ultimately that's the place. Like truthfully, because I went through in a different way a very the past year and a half were very like dark days for me. Like I was not feeling myself. I was depressed. You know, for me, when I'm depressed, I don't even acknowledge I'm depressed until like 3 months into the depression. I'm like, oh fuck,
yeah. No, it
I
creeps
think
up
I'm
on you,
depressed.
huh? Yeah.
And so like I at this point, having seeming, I really feel I kind of came out of it and like started to like feel like myself again. I would say 4 or 5 months ago. It's amazing how a nice trip to Turkey with your family on a yacht will make you
That sounds
feel.
nice. This is very
Not
Jeff
like it was
Bezos of
that
you.
hard. Yeah, it really was, dude. The first
It's
year,
like Noah and
2
Jeff
years ago.
Bezos are like, what are you all complaining about? We're just on a
Listen,
yacht in Turkey.
listen to this. 2 years before I went, Bezos and Bill Gates had, by the way, they don't own yachts typically. They rent them because so
Super
those yachts where we were staying in Göcek in Turkey, and I literally saw their yachts that they were renting, and they're like, it's insane. It's like mountains of stuff.
I mean, why would you want to own a yacht? There's so much upkeep. You just like rent.
Well, it is if you use it. I could say is like
I ask as if I'm like in the market for a yacht. I'm like, I'm really thinking about this.
I'm blessed enough to be like in a family where my in-laws like do live that life with those types of things. And so like the thing is, if you're like really about the sea, and this is not a lot of people, but if you really love the sea, if you grew up near the sea, with the sea, especially like the sea in the Aegean and the Mediterranean, and you really use that, like it's not a great investment from like an investment standpoint, but it is a worthwhile way of spending your time. But
I'm sure it's awesome. I'm just saying, like, why would you buy a whole yacht when you could rent it?
I completely 100%. The only time would be is if you're using it so much that it actually makes more sense, because renting it would be more expensive.
Like you're a Bond villain and you're operating your you're operating like, FTX off of a yacht.
Yeah. So but I mean, coming out of like a depression, like I do have a much kind of like simpler, like the kind of the way you said it, like it doesn't have to be a complicated thing, but I'm just trying to like appreciate what situations I have created for myself and the life that I am in. And it's interesting how when you kind of accept that, and in a lot of ways let that previous version of yourself kind of like die off, that I don't want to say good stuff kind of starts to happen. Like more magical things. Like one things that happen
when you let your previous self die off. That's what you said.
Yeah. That's and like magic and imagination and all of the mystical stuff. I find when I'm depressed, I have less of a connection to that than when I do in a more creative, stable standpoint. There is a point of like an inflection point where you do have to kind of like seize that again individually to kind of access it. But it's I guess life just to me feels at this point like kind of like a learning experiment. And as long as you're not causing damage to yourself and other people continuously, like you're probably fine, and you'll probably have like a decent enough life. So
no, I'm a big believer that like our what we tell ourselves life is really important. It's like small things like that. It's like just telling yourself that life is like about learning. Like I love that. That's a big one for me. Like my favorite thing is learning new stuff. Just learning how to use new systems and for me, like everything, like I care about learning more than money.
Yeah, totally.
And like
without a doubt.
Otherwise, like, you can imagine like the other stuff that I could be doing. But working for Klaus Schwab.
Yeah, there you go. Good old W.
Yeah.
Another great organization.
Yeah. Making people eat the bugs. But what was I saying? It's like, yeah, learning is a great one, but I mean, it's like you can tell yourself it's like life is suffering, life is a test, life is warfare, life is struggle, life is a rocket ride to the grave. It's like, well, like all of that is maybe true, but it's like you got to pick your metaphors about. It's like these small things, like what you tell yourself life is, what you tell yourself the universe is. Like one of the best magical quote unquote, like actually you would appreciate this, one of the most magical, like I'm a big believer also when people ask me about learning magic, my first advice to them this is not on my website, but when I'm talking to people one-on-one, it's like if somebody is serious and they say to me, it's like, how do I learn magic? It's like my first advice to them is like, do not fucking read occult books. Like, just forget it. Like, it's like all of the most important information you're going to learn talking to people out in life, living your life, but also from the most unexpected sources. So there's a book you probably know, actually, Market Wizards by Jack Schwager.
I don't know it.
Oh, it's a really famous. It's a Jack Schwager did like 3 books of interviews with financial traders,
Oh,
and they're all
cool.
called market wizards, and they have like a wizard on the front. So like you understand, it would pique my interest.
Yeah, yeah, of
Um,
course.
but I forget who he is. Who he was interviewing a trader who said, at the end of the day, it's interesting. It's like some of these guys, they're like, at the end of their careers, and they have all the money they could ever want. So they're like reflecting on what is really important in life. A lot of those guys are like that, like Ray Dalio and people like that. But he was saying it's like the most important thing in life, the most important decision you can make in life is if whether the universe is a friendly place or not.
Yeah. That's
That's big.
probably the most important. If you believe in a benevolent, just, good place, which I believe you should, just personally, my personal
works
stance is
better.
that is accurate. Like, let's just say consciousness is non-ethical. Let's say good is just a concept, right? Let's say your subjective feeling of good is just, it is ultimately just a concept. Like, what would you rather resonate? Something that feels not harmonious, and maybe there are people who tend to skew towards that, but most people who I interact with want to feel fulfilled. They want to feel happy. They want to feel good. So wouldn't you want to believe in a place where you incarnate and exist? Like, yeah, you could be like, well, what if it's a trick and they're keeping us in
Right.
a human zoo? It's like, all right, I mean, fine, sure. But do you have enough ability to think about that? Then maybe it's not that. Or maybe they gave you just enough to not question. I don't give a shit. Like that, those thoughts to me
Yeah.
cease to exist because I've made the fundamental decision
Yeah.
that
And it is a decision.
it is a friendly place. It is a good place. It's not a place we come to suffer specifically. We suffer? Yeah, but is there a beauty even in that suffering? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
it's a paradox obviously in a lot of ways, but to me, if you maintain that perspective most of the time, you should be pretty good.
Oh yeah. And I've
You
lived
should
in
be
the other
pretty good.
one. Like
Of course,
I've
like,
spent years in that kind of like Gnostic, like the world is a trap, everything is a trick, like this is a torture realm, like for real. And abyss,
it's
constant
hard.
abyss. It's
And
like, yeah. And but all that it is, it's just a choice.
exactly. I do believe that. This is
Because
my
you have
argument.
people always forget this. You're the one who has the choice. Particularly conspiracy theory people, they spend all day long looking for reasons why their life needs to suck. It's like you realize you have agency, right? You're not controlled by Klaus Schwab or whoever. And it's like if
No,
those
you're
people
not
are
at all.
there, like so what? It's like it's like the things like is Klaus Schwab in the room with you right now?
Exactly. Exactly. They
Is
don't
he
know
making
about
you eat
Klaus
the bugs?
Schwab. You're in the corner. Yeah.
Or is he making you eat bugs right now?
Yeah. I mean, and also just like the ideas, like, you know what? Listen, maybe the Klaus Schwab and other financial elite, they really think the bug economy for us eating bugs is just a good idea. You know what I mean? People have shitty
Yeah,
ideas
they're
all the
they're
time.
just
They
friendly
just,
grandpas in like Saturn robes.
yeah,
It's like,
they just, yeah,
they
exactly.
just got they're
They
fashionable.
just, I mean, I also like, I mean, that's one of the reasons I really like crypto. It's just, it, it's not all a scam. Unfortunately, I do think
A lot of
when these
scams, but yeah.
events, I mean, I'm in a literal scam right now. I have to withdraw in like an hour to unbond, which is going to take 3 days as the liquidity slowly gets drained from this pool. That's clearly a Ponzi, but I entered willingly because I needed some life in a really ferocious bear market, which I do think is probably going to be over, 2023 at some point.
You
Probably.
want to make any predictions or calls?
Yeah, I will confidently make predictions and see how they fare. I do think if you look at most drawdowns in previous downward cycles where this is not going to be super fun for people to hear, this isn't even close to the worst. We're like 77% down on Bitcoin, and the alts are like in like I think the 70s or the 80s. Routinely, this market will draw down 93 to 96%.
Yeah.
Like that sounds insane to people, but it's happened
That's
so
crypto.
many times. It's
Yeah.
crypto because it is a
Well,
speculative
every
asset.
cycle there's lots of new people in who they haven't been through this.
The bear case for like this being just an unusual kind of, out of the ordinary event would be that what really drove the money this time was what everyone wanted the cycle for, which is a lot of institutional money. Unfortunately, not all of it. There's a misconception. Like Terra Luna, retail took the hit of almost all of that. Institutions were
I
able
took
to
a
pull
hit
out
on
their
that.
money. Yeah, I mean, retail, I didn't because, like, just word to the wise general rule in crypto. If you're getting over 10% interest on US dollar or a synthetic US derivative of it that's stable, that is probably a Ponzi. It's not how it works. The US dollar DXY will shit on your face every single time because it is literally the petrodollar that runs the world right now, whether you like it or not. Now, the ruble, interestingly, has reacted differently than I think a lot of people thought. Since the war, it actually did better. But anyway, getting back to the point of crypto, I don't personally believe that institutional money got burned for more than they could afford to lose, whether that's VCs or like big firms or like people like Genesis who look like they're probably going to go bankrupt. Sorry, Barry. But I do think that we've probably seen most of the drawdown already. We're hovering like below 16. I didn't check recently, but probably like 15.6 last I checked. I think Bitcoin could go as low as $11,000, somewhere in that range. See, that's like a more fuller drawdown.
I think that's likely. I would say it could go as low as 3,000, but
Oh, it could go. I mean, it could.
yeah.
I just see realistically, I don't see it going lower than that particular range. I would definitely not be alone in becoming a buyer probably down there. I'm either going to buy this range as it's breaking out or I'm going to buy lower. So like this is still already a level where I'd be like, you know what? Like in 3 years, I don't think 16,000, 15,000, 12,000, $18,000 Bitcoin is going to be the thing that made or break me. It's going to be the market started coming back at these levels and I was able to enter into whatever I was in.
Right.
So I think that's probably what happens. I think in terms of a timeline, I do believe like 2023, probably early. I think a lot of
that's
these,
pretty soon.
it's pretty soon. We're talking about like 2 months, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
not that long. I do think we're going to bottom out there. And I don't know if it's going to be like a hard wick up, but retrospectively looking back, that'll probably be a point where it's like, this wasn't a bad time to start investing in some stuff. Now, I would say like anything like
This is not
alts,
financial advice.
100% not financial advice, but also like alts, don't trade
I don't fuck
off
with alts
speculative
at all anymore.
alts. I do just
I'm a
because
Bitcoin
like,
maximalist at this point.
you know what? I mean, I've gone through this cycle twice now with Bitcoin. I'm not back on a Bitcoin maxi just because like the dollar is better than Bitcoin when it's dropping, and it's something I didn't really fully appreciate until like I got wiped out a couple of times. But essentially, your Bitcoin is going to be the thing that drives the market because in terms of a premise of what a blockchain technology does or currency or whatever you want to call it, it does what it's supposed to do. And it's not going to be taken down by a nation state. And it's
Right.
not going to like, you're basically your counterparty to this, or not your counterparty, but your real risk here is going to be an electrical grid, like the internet goes offline. But even
Yeah,
then,
but it's like at that point, like you got bigger problems.
that's
It's
exactly
like-
my point. So to me, it's like inevitable that Bitcoin, it's not a failed experiment. I mean,
No.
people who don't follow crypto don't understand just how comically bad things have been in like a span of like really like a year. That's when it topped out. But like 3 months, 2 months, a month. Like people don't understand how ridiculous because everyone trades like a retard. Sorry, I know that word's not permitted sometimes. Everyone trades, in a not a smart way plenty of times in their life. But to see
Yeah.
firms doing this with billions of dollars on leverage, it's like, guys,
Yeah. Michael Saylor.
what do you think? Michael Saylor is still alive at least. Look at Three Arrows. Look at, all of FTX, the Alameda, like these people. Alameda combined with FTX, just to highlight how bad this fraud was and how corrupt they were. They were the market makers, the person who determined, you were like, what's a market maker? How could someone determine the price? They have enough liquidity to balance out and buy and sell to keep prices within ranges that allows people to like reliably interact and sell and buy without crazy slippage and prices getting out of control. It's not like an evil thing. It's liquidity. So they had that advantage at FTX. No, Alameda's the market maker. Then they have the exchange where they literally can front run people's positions because they see money flowing in and out. So they have this advantage, right? They still couldn't not bust. Like that is unbelievable to me. Like, you have the winning hands shown at the poker table, which, by the way, their CTO was our CFO. I forget which guy was literally the dude who was Ultimate Bets, who they did that thing. They could look into the hole cards in poker and see what was going on, and they got in trouble for it. That's the guy at FTX, and they still blew out. Like that, it's ultimately because I don't think any of these people are crypto natives, right? They're like glommers on. If you really understand crypto, you should be able to at least cockroach yourself and like survive. You should be able to at least do
That's
that.
pretty much all you can do at certain points. I mean, and I've learned that lesson. Like I bought my first Bitcoin in 2014, and if I just kept it instead of buying drugs, I would have been rich. But
tell me about it, dude. I mean, that's why you buy Bitcoin.
So yeah, I mean, you have to. I mean, yeah, I think people are expecting it to behave like the normal markets. It's not. It's a crazy crack house thing.
That gap is definitely closing, though. This year, especially, like stocks were going hamboni, like the GameStop stuff, Robinhood, like stopping.
Yeah.
You know, it's.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, everyone's picking on crypto. Like, oh my God, crypto's over. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's like, have you looked at everything else?
Everything else.
Everything is down.
Go look at Netflix, please. Go look at literally any fucking major company, American or international company, and like any stock exchange.
Yeah, look at Amazon, Meta, and Twitter. Obviously, I mean, they're just laying people off left, right, and center.
I weirdly, that like narrative of it's supposed to be bothering you that he's laying people off.
Oh, I'm not bothered at all.
On me. I'm like, this is amazing.
Elon,
like, these people seem like they should not have been getting this much money.
Did you know that 7,500 people were working at Twitter?
It's unbelievable
fuck?
to me.
How like? And I asked this on Twitter. I'm like, how the fuck do you need 7,500 people to run Twitter? It's like and people were coming out of the woodwork being like, well, we can't run it in the cloud. We need our own infrastructure. I'm like, okay, even if you run your own infrastructure, if you add up all those people's salaries, like, and all of that, like, it's just like
benefits
and
insurance,
benefits, just like, and
taxes.
Like, yeah. And it's like the food bill, it's
and like I want people to have jobs, and I want people to have jobs.
But if you want people to have jobs, then you need to have companies that are not burning money into the void.
That's what I mean. Like, people should have jobs that actually, like, I respect someone who wants to work. Personally,
you need to have a functional, profitable company to have jobs. You can't just give people jobs.
But that what's weird to me, and I didn't really start delving into this until social media became big, because it was like part of what I was doing in terms of like digital marketing. I didn't know how common it was for companies to purposely run deficits because revenue was high enough. So even if they were losing money, there was still revenue coming in that essentially fit into other components of like credit and all of these debt and all of these other weird things that work for taxes and stuff. But it's not terribly uncommon for very large companies. Like Apple and Google and Facebook are exceptions to the rule.
Well, like, Amazon didn't run a profit for 20 years.
Right. But the stock price, I mean,
right.
They're so my point is, it's like, it's like, understand that like, well, even what we perceive as value, like most people would agree that if you have a lot of money in the bank, that's a good thing. It's not a good thing. It's a very bad thing. Anyone who has ever had to withdraw crypto quickly comes to the realization that if they don't have some way to do this where they're not personally taking out a shitload of money relative to what their regular salary or income would be, is you're going to get taxed some motherfucking crazy land. So there's lots of ways that people use debt and like money coming in from either credit or other things that like, it's funny money. Like it's really funny money at its core. It's like the institutions from the banking situations. That's why I think it's going to roll over. But
that's the thing. I mean, it's like at a certain level, I mean, that's how the American economy has been working, and it's divorced from reality, and people sense that. One of the things that Kanye was saying in his manic incident that I think was pretty interesting, actually, was he was pointing out that a lot of these companies like are not there for profit. Like they're there for cultural influence.
Yeah. It's not about the money.
Yeah. Like they made like Adidas or whatever. It's like, they're not necessarily making that much money. They just maintain these companies for the cultural power. Like because
it's past the point. Like money.
Twitter would be the best example of that, right?
Well, that's putting your capital to use, like I would say, because he bought digital like consciousness. He basically bought a
Yeah.
stream of awareness. And I think whatever you want to say about Elon, he bought my favorite social media platform. He bought the only platform that I've really never considered like abandoning because it's functional in my life. So like that's credit to him. Like he got that aspect of it. And I do think the cultural influence you have by just be even associated with that for him personally is probably worth some billions of dollars.
No, well, I mean,
Because,
it's like moguls, like all the robber barons and moguls all bought newspapers. Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. I mean, this is the exact same thing. But it's like people who make this argument, it's like, well, like, look, I mean, Twitter was already being financed by the Saudis and like all these people, it's like just because it's somebody you recognize, you think it's different. You know what I mean?
it's just for me, when I think about that stuff, usually where I jump off is I'm like, what a weird game to play for yourself, to be like the world's richest or in competition for the world's richest or most powerful person, publicly facing, we should say, right? Like what odd place to place your priority. But for them, clearly, they're comfortable with it, I would hope, and enjoy it, I would hope. And they're at least getting something out of it at the very least, because, it doesn't look to be super fun. Like, sure, who wouldn't love billions of dollars, I guess, on some level, but like on another level, like you don't realize how old it would get to have. You would be comfortable at a certain dollar amount. Except that we'll agree that there is it can provide comfort and luxury to a point. It may be the most finest of luxury, but most people don't really want that.
Well, that's assuming you're motivated by that. I think a lot of particularly ultra wealthy people are driven by other things like competition, or they need to be the best, or they need to build something, or they find it fascinating.
That's true.
Like look at Bill Gates. Like what the fuck drives that guy? It's clearly not money, or he wouldn't be like fucking with everybody.
I guess the thing is like I revealed myself when I'm saying it's about comfort. That's what like money's function should be. It should make my life and people I love's life, and hopefully anyone else who needs it.
But that's not how other people think. I mean, they think money is about power.
That's why they have more money. That's why they have the money.
Right.
That's literally the main differentiating factor. But that's where I like jump off like the game of like what Elon is playing, or Jeff, or like any of those people, because it's just like I'm not on that wavelength. Like I just don't understand fundamentally the allure of that.
I'm willing to give it a shot if anyone wants to.
Hey, I mean,
listen, up with a couple $1 billion. Let's see what I could do terraforming the planet for a decade or two. It couldn't be worse than now.
Dog coin that comes out early, and don't sell it like a dingus, and we'll see what happens. I know someone who made like like I think a couple $100,000 in ass coin. Do you remember ass coin?
No.
Australian Shepherd.
No.
Something dog coin. Yeah, like a good friend of mine made like 100, 200.
Maybe I should get on your Discord.
Well, I would argue that it's always a useful resource. The chatter goes down significantly in bear markets. It's just people who like hang in there, and like someone found like a Ponzi, and like that's a Ponzi. They're like, oh, but when it's really there's very few advantages that are as good as having like a localized, driven, intelligent community surrounding something like crypto. Like it's rare. It is hard to find places that call out bullshit and will hold people accountable, and like will be realistic with you about why they're doing something, like, and not being like, oh, I have thought this out so well. This will go to this price because I'm like, I'm buying this shit. I hope it goes to this price.
Every time I've ever been in crypto discords, it's just like people posting like rocket emojis and talking about like, Lambos.
That was basically like, the tail end when people didn't realize the bull market was over. But when the bull market is literally going on, you'll get tons of valid tips. Now, just to be clear, for everyone who loses money on a coin, there's someone else who is making that money usually. Like the liquidity is going somewhere. So it is one of those games where like, if you recognize a lot of this stuff is just like early, be plugged in, and we'll see if a narrative emerges around something. That's pretty much how you make money in crypto. That's it. That's how Sam Bankman-Fried did it. They invented synthetic tokens out of nothing and said, these have value now. It's like, that's not how you do it. That's not how BNB did it. When they did it, they were burning these tokens and buying tokens. that's how you create fucking liquidity for a token.
Right.
What you say? There's like 650 million. What? What are you doing? I wish. Thanks, dude. I wish I could do that. It's a good one. It's nuts, but
it's nuts.
I love crypto.
Fun stuff. Well, we've been talking for like two hours and 40 minutes. These podcasts are getting long. Yeah. This is a good conversation, though. We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, man. Awesome times.
I should get off because I got to send out an email about the last one I put out.
And I fittingly have to withdraw from a Ponzi that my unlock starts in like 32 minutes.
Don't get wrecked.
Perfect,
All right. Good to talk to you, Noah.
Peace, man.
All right. I'll talk to you later. All right. Hope you really, really enjoyed that. I definitely had a lot of fun in that conversation. Meet us at magic.me, magick.me, my school for magic, meditation, and mysticism, where you can learn all the skills you need to unleash your true self. I will see you in class, and until next time, hang in there.